Welcome, everyone, this evening to tonight's Yountville Town Council on June 19th, 2012. I invite all of our guests that are here this evening. If you are not familiar, we have staff reports on the wall to your right as you came in, if you would like to follow along specifically on any of the items. I do ask if you have cell phones, if you would please turn them off while you're in here. They do provide interference with our audio equipment, so that would be much appreciated, other than our public safety representatives here this evening. We did meet prior to this in a special meeting for some interviews of town and county appointments, but now I'll convene this regular council meeting to order and ask for a roll call, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Hall?
Here.
Councilmember Moeller?
Here.
Councilmember Dornbecker?
Here.
Vice Mayor Chilton?
Here.
Mayor Dunbar?
Here. Please join me if you can and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next up, closed session report. Do we have any report from our last closed session?
No, there's nothing to report.
Thank you. Next up, adoption of tonight's agenda. Are there any questions or changes, or is there a motion to adopt?
I'll make a motion that we adopt the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Move right on to item 8, public comment. Now is the time that if you have anything you'd like to address the council about, now would be the time if it's not on tonight's agenda. So if you're here waiting on another item that we're going to get to later, please hold your comments till then. But if this is something completely unrelated to an item that's on tonight, now would be the time to come forward. Do we have any members of the public that would like to make a comment? Seeing no one, I'll move on then to our consent calendar. Is there any action to be had on the consent calendar? Like a motion?
I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. I do want to note for the record, on item 9E, the Hotel Yountville Hopper Creek Apartment decision, there were two dissenting votes on the original request for that item from Councilmember Moeller and Councilmember Hall, just to make sure that the record does reflect that. Moving on, let's see, where's my next item? It would be item 10, presentations. We had so many closed session items, or consent items, I couldn't find my spot. First up, we invite our administrator of our California Veterans Home to step forward and give us an update on all things Veterans Home. Welcome, Commander.
Thank you very much, Mayor. It's such a pleasure to come here. Our census is at 1,000. That puts us at 98% capacity. We continue to admit. We have another 15 admissions scheduled for the month of July, so we're on a pace of 15 to 20 admissions per month. We continue to fill our critical positions. We have a lot of bulletins out. We're still filling. We're getting a new training officer. We have a new health and safety officer as of today, CNAs, nurses, physical therapists, so we're continuing to very actively hire and care for all of those veterans that we have. We get tremendous support from Travis Air Force Base. They were here last Saturday for Operation Gratitude, which honored all of our veterans. We had a very nice party, but they're also going to be here for the 4th of July and get as many as possible out of our people who have mobility problems, need a manual wheelchair push, want to go out for the day. We expect almost 50 active duty airmen from Travis to be assisting us there. This last quarter, we had a visit from Deborah Bowen, Secretary of the State of California, first time she'd been here. She wore high heels, and we tried walking her, and it didn't work, so she promises to be back again, and maybe we can work on having you part of the tour at that time. So she was it's a little bit bigger than she thought it would be. I want to thank you all very much for your support of the post office and the support of Congressman Thompson. It's very important to our population that they have their post office, and they very much use it. So that's a gratitude to the whole community coming together for that. The exchange at the Veterans Home is now open on Saturdays. They were given a service Monday through Friday. The federal law says that exchanges must break even in order to stay open. We have had enough purchases between our members and anybody in the community and our staff that the exchange has enough money to open on Saturday. So we're hoping as we continue to utilize the exchange at the home that it may in fact open on Sundays after that. So we're working on a stepwise progression. We bought a lot of equipment this year. We bought $1,031,594 worth of equipment this year. We bought some low beds for those of our members who have trouble getting out. The beds adjust. They're lower than people who need hospitalized beds. We finished out flat screen televisions for everyone who's in the Eisenhower building. We bought ovens, stoves, and all necessary equipment. So we have one budget that's ours, and then headquarters gets a separate equipment budget, and we have such a great staff that when there's just a little bit left over, we have all the paperwork ready to go at the end of the year. So we're very proud to have all of that new equipment. In the plant operations world, we have a contractor for the bowling center, and they toured June 7th. It's AMF Bowling, who partnered with a company, they're out of Richmond, with a company from Bologna, Italy, that does the computer systems for the scoring. AMF realized a long time ago that they made great balls, great pins, great bowling equipment, but didn't quite have the technology for the computerized scoring system, so they partnered with another company. They did get the bid, and we're waiting for the installation of that. They walked it, measured it, and going it. So we're expecting to open the bowling center late this summer. We're doing a fire alarm upgrade system. It's a $3 million project to our buildings on the, I think, the north side, the J's and the H's and the F's and the D's, not on the Holderman side. This will give, most of our fire alarms now go just to a hallway. This will give to a room, to a location, to a fire panel, so we see it as a better protection for our members that go off. They're also ADA compliant, so we're moving into that world too. We are doing repairs to the Holderman smoke barrier alarm doors. We found that many of our magnets had worn out, and when the fire alarm goes off, the doors don't either stay back or stay up or meet. The manufacturer simply does not manufacture those doors anymore, so we're replacing every one of the doors and every one of the holdbacks in Holderman to give safety in that building also. A lot of the equipment we bought were new wash stations, fire blankets, those kinds of things too. We're doing sewer and stormwater repairs, but we're almost finished with that, which will allow less groundwater intrusion into the sewer plant. We got a little extra money at the end of the year, and we've decided to replace all of the locks. Some of our locks were getting old. The members in C, we replaced the doors to the outside, and we replaced the locks inside there. So they'll get all new key system, all new locks, so they'll be able to do that. So we continue to actively pursue our plant operations, our equipment, and keep our census up to where it is. So, any questions?
Any specific questions?
Hi.
Councilmember Hall.
Hi, thank you for the report. Two questions. So you said the exchange is open on Saturday?
That's correct.
Is that correct? And is it open to residents of Yountville?
Yes, it's open to anybody.
So this is the Army Air Force Exchange Service?
Correct. So they do not charge tax.
Yeah, my father was an employee for a long time. So that's great to know.
Very
It's-
proud to have them. They're
Yeah.
a great organization.
And then you mentioned the bowling alley, and you said late summer. So, but you won't give us like a month, would you?
Well, I want to see AMFB here, and then I have them tell me what day they're going to be here, so they're getting the pins. We're ordering 60 pairs of shoes and 30 new balls, too. So we got a recommendation for them for balls and shoes, so it'll be all new there.
Fantastic. Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Great.
I know that you've had to avoid committing any dates. I've seen in a number of allied council meetings, every meeting, I think, the question is, when's it opening?
Yeah, I work in the contracting process of the state, so it's very difficult. But once I see that they've got the balls here, but I saw them, they were here, so once we get there, we'll be moving along. So we're ordering the balls and the shoes right now in anticipation of that. We've already prepped the bowling center for them. We did 2 previous contracts. When the bowling center was originally built in that building in 1958, it was a manual ball return. And in somewhere in the early 60s, 64 or so, they decided to make it automatic ball return, but they set the automatic ball return on top. So all bowling systems now are underneath return. So we got 2 contracts, one to take out the old equipment, the other to dig the grooves to the specs of bowling equipment. So when they come in, all they have to do is install the ball returns right there. So we've prepped the site for them. This is just an installation of the bowling equipment.
And I do just want to recognize you and your entire staff for the Memorial Day services that are always very, compelling, and it's our real privilege to be a part of that every year. So thank you and everyone that made that a wonderful experience the whole weekend, really.
Good. And on Thursday, we will have a Korean Veterans Service event with Secretary Gravitt and DOD here to present them certificates for the end of the war.
And the last thing I was going to bring up, since we're not going to be meeting on the 3rd, is we're about to partner again for a wonderful 4th of July fireworks display, so we're all looking forward to that as well.
And one more plug, we've decided to do a kind of game zone. We invite the whole community. It really is a community project. So we're going to have, over in one of our parking lots, we're going to do ball tosses and games and have a real family kind of fun zone over there. So we invite you all. We're happy to see you up there. We're going to have music, sometimes every hour and a half to every 2 hours. We're going to change it from jazz to swing to rock, with the final concert for starting at 7 and ending at 9:30 right before the fireworks. But it is for families, for people. It's a great party, and it's a safe place to be. And thank you for reminding me about that, Mayor Dunbar. But we are going to do a great family fun zone this year, so we'd really like to see everybody for that. So
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming. Next up in our presentations, Chamber of Commerce, Marketing and Promotional Services Annual Report. Welcome.
Hi, welcome. I'm Katya Levelholtz, a resident of Yountville and your current chamber president. I'll just start by saying good evening and thank you for letting us present to you this evening. Oops.
I'll advance if you'd like.
This one? There we go. There we go. Okay, the mission statement of the Chamber of Commerce is we're governed by a volunteer board of directors, and we actively market the town of Yountville and promote tourism or local businesses while contributing to the community. And part of our true to our mission statement, we've developed 4 working committees, our board members. The first one was the Visitor Center Review Committee, and we were taking a look at sprucing up the visitor center so it's more appealing to visitors and assisting with staffing and training needs. The next committee that we formed is the Events Review Committee, and primarily we are looking at the Taste of Yountville, rebranding it, rethinking it, so it speaks to Yountville. And we've formed a Membership Development Committee, taking a look at our rate structure and what value we are providing to our members. And the fourth committee we formed is our Marketing Committee, which is taking a look at new programming such as improving our website or completely revamping our website, our social networking, and our promotional materials. And with that, I want to introduce you to our new Visitor Center Relations Manager and our Member Relations Manager, Dave Hummer.
Hi, Dave.
Sure.
Why don't you come
on up. Say
come on
hi.
up, because folks at home that are watching on TV, if we have one camera, we get both of you.
Dave, and you can tell a little bit about your...
Absolutely. As Kaja mentioned, I'm the new Visitor Center Manager and Member Relations Manager. I was hired, I guess, a little over 2 weeks ago, and I'm very happy to be working for the Chamber of Commerce and marketing the town of Yountville.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And you all know Cindy Sosserman, and she's our Executive Director, and she'll be telling you more about what's happening, our goals and objectives.
Thank you, Katja. Thank you, Mayor, Council. We've got some pretty heroic goals and objectives for the upcoming fiscal year. A comprehensive public relations plan. This campaign will target regional, national, and the international visitors. Developing a strategic marketing plan, which will help convey the image that is deserving of a world-class destination. Enhancing the visitor experience. We're developing new programming and enhancing the our primary asset, which is the Visitor Information Center. This is a major component for visitor education and asset to the community, and we're looking at creating a new visitor experience. As Katja mentioned, we're reviewing special events. We're going to attempt to move away from the street festival format in an effort to create and execute a world-class event to showcase the Yountville lifestyle. And finally, we're working on building relationships throughout the community, the tourism-serving community, working on existing relationships to help leverage Yountville's marketing dollar. Whoops. I'd like to recap. Unfortunately, Edelman representatives couldn't be here this evening, so I'll do my best to recap their public relations efforts from last year. First of all, the off-season event promotion. As you know, they promote and market the Festival of Lights and Taste of Yountville, including press releases, website content development, media outreach, both national and Bay Area, and trying to address all the media outlets, such as Bay Area-based media and bloggers. Comprehensive coverage reporting and programming recaps. As far as stakeholder education, as many of you know, they conducted the social media workshop for the Chamber members. They also presented to the Economic Outlook Yountville, PR Trends, and they held Yountville office hours to provide council and individual stakeholders information and assistance throughout the business community. Their press materials and online press, they've managed to revise all press materials, including the Yountville fact sheet, created story ideas and documents that are available at yountville.com. They've provided recommendations for content and online press room on yountville.com. Council for website vendor, providing interim support for the Yountville Chamber Facebook page, and engaging both stakeholders and consumers with Yountville news. So they've really been quite busy and developing those relationships with all of our businesses in the community, and they're going to continue that next fiscal year. Ongoing media relations and PR support, promotion of Yountville-based chamber members to national and Bay Area-based media, and coordination of press trip requests and reactive information requests from the press also. Looking ahead for fiscal year 2013, public relations, in addition to the items listed above, which is all PR speak, the Chamber continues to contract with Edelman to conduct our public relations campaign and assist us with our marketing efforts. Weekly reporting indicates no less than a dozen media outreach updates, and several target Yountville in the News articles each week. The Chamber relies heavily on their efforts in the promotion of off-season events, such as the Festival of Lights and Taste of Yountville, of course, as well as providing marketing support for other programming. Edelman will continue to participate in Chamber and town-sponsored events, such as our Economic Outlook, and conducting open office for the benefit of all of our business members in the community. And I'd just like to invite the council and anyone here this evening, if you are interested in receiving our public relations weekly updates and having them sent directly to your email, just let us know. We'll get you on their mailing list. It is really interesting information, and I know some of you already receive it. Marketing Yountville. Katja mentioned we have several new committees, working committees. This board is working harder than ever, and we're working harder than ever to carry out that policy. The website. We're currently working with Squarespace, a firm in New York that has been retained by the Chamber. Not retained, so to speak, but we're working on a new website with Squarespace on a complimentary website in exchange for promotional consideration. So this is a real asset to us. This is the company that's currently developing the TKRG Group websites. In an effort to reinforce the Yountville brand, we're also looking at revising our e-newsletter and outsourcing our social media, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, that sort of thing, to achieve a uniform look and feel and to continue sending a consistent message. Targeting demographics, as you know, approximately 79% of our visitors are from California. We target key metro areas in California, such as the East Bay, San Francisco, San Jose, Los Angeles, Sacramento, San Diego, and we also target major metro areas in the United States, such as Chicago, New York, Houston, and Seattle, with all of our media efforts. We're in the process of leveraging our relationships throughout the county, focusing on chamber and hospitality organizations, such as the Napa Valley Destination Council, Canvas, which is a membership organization focusing on the hospitality industry, Calistoga, St. Helena, Napa, and American Canyon Chambers. And we're meeting regularly to exchange program ideas and information. High-gloss promotional materials. We're kicking it up a notch. We're speaking to graphic artists, photographers, designers to professionally produce our marketing and promotional materials. And finally, merchandising. We're creating a new line of logo merchandise, clothing, athletic wear, wine accessories, etc., to promote and brand Yountville. As you know, our Visitor Information Center is one of our greatest assets. We're working on enhancing the visitor experience when they come to Yountville. We're seeing upward of 45,000 visitors a year. In addition, we respond to more than 4,300 telephone inquiries, and we're receiving approximately 72,000 hits a year on our website and addressing dozens of inquiries daily. We are an information source, and we're working very hard to keep up with that information request flow. Professional and part-time staff puts in upward of 4,400 hours a year. These efforts are coordinated with approximately 3,600 volunteer hours that keep the Visitor Center open 7 days a week, and plans are in the process of extending hours of operation through the high season, the peak tourist season, July through October. We found that closing the doors at 5 o'clock don't really cut it in town, because a lot of folks are checking into their hotel rooms between 3:30 and 4, and they want to come over and get information, find out what's going on in town, where to go dine, and where to shop and enjoy late night entertainment, which is a rarity. Located on Washington Street, and I know many of you know where we are, but I know some of you haven't been in to visit us. Located on Washington Street, the recently remodeled Visitor Information Center with new flooring, paint, displays, and furnishings. is enjoying high visibility and serves as a welcome convenience to the visitors and locals alike. Please drop by and take a look. It really looks great. Events. Festival of Lights. The Chamber continues to contract to light the town for the holidays every year. This year, we will install townwide lighting early for the gala opening of the Napa Valley Film Festival on Wednesday, November 7th. We also produce, we also produce the Veterans Day Celebrity Chefs Luncheon. This year it's going to be on Thursday, November 1st. With all the events that are taking place in November, we had to move the date, so mark your calendars. The annual installation and awards dinner, the Taste of Yountville, which I'll discuss in a moment, and of course, several mixers, business-to-business exchanges, and other community-based events. We are currently preparing a request for proposal to go out to a few professional event production firms to assist with the evolution of Taste of Yountville. Our goal is to create an event that is more reflective of Yountville's world-class status as the culinary capital of the Napa Valley, as opposed to the street festival format in years past. All events produced by the Chamber of Commerce are designed to enhance business exposure, promote the town of Yountville, and engage the community. The Chamber continues with its business education and community outreach to sponsor business information forums in conjunction with the town of Yountville to address the needs and concerns throughout the business community, such as the Candidates Forum, Yountville Economic Outlook, Open Office with Edelman, and we've been working with the college to do food handling safety courses. These open forums present an opportunity for the residential community to express their opinions. We continue to provide networking opportunities key to the success of any business community. And just for your information, our Chamber Ambassador Program continues with our outreach program to ensure that new businesses and seasoned Chamber members are welcomed and realize the full potential of their membership. Oh. Uh-oh. There should be a little table in that slide. Wait, what happened? Okay. Well, slide number 10 gives a brief snapshot of our budget.
Very brief.
And you got, yes, it's very brief. Did they get this?
Yes, we have it.
Okay, this is the detailed, but let me run through this this little budget really quickly. It's pretty easy to understand. Sorry about that. Revenue, events are generating $135,000 plus dollars. Marketing generates $252,000. Operating generates $90,600 for a total of $477,000 and some change. And in terms of expenses, event expenses are approximately $121,000. Marketing expenses, approximately $198,000. Operating expenses, approximately $158,000. For a total of $477,737, and that is our proposed budget for fiscal year 2012-2013. I'll send that table to you directly. Finally, the bottom line, what does all this mean? Yountville currently spends just over 3.7% of its overall budget to generate 75% of its general fund revenue. Comparatively, this is an exceptional value and is crucial for Yountville to maintain its competitive edge in the Napa Valley tourism market. Our goal as the Chamber of Commerce is to keep Yountville at the forefront as a world-class tourist destination. We continue with public relations and marketing programming to drive visitors and locals to Yountville businesses, ensure that every visitor to Yountville has access to the resources and information needed to have the best possible Yountville Napa Valley experience. We continue to provide excellent networking opportunities to our membership, and through all of these efforts, the Chamber continues to help stimulate the local economy and contribute to the town's economic vitality. Do you have any questions for me?
Questions about the presentation?
Sorry about the little budget thing.
Vice Mayor?
I have two questions. Should put it down somewhere. Oh, well, one question and then one comment. You talked about the Taste of Yountville as a world-class event. What does that mean? Like, what are you guys envisioning?
We're attempting to move away from a street festival format that is weather dependent for its success. And in so doing, the committee has come up with some ideas for different events. It would probably span a range of 3 to 4 days, starting earlier in the week to generate hotel rooms. And then there would be special events throughout the whole weekend. Celebrity chef and winemaker dinners, exclusive, limited access. Perhaps the next day we would have cooking demonstrations, book signings, really focus on the Yountville Appalachian wineries and our restaurants that are unique to Yountville and our Michelin star chefs. We're working on getting buy-in from these individuals on the program reformatting, and finally it would probably culminate on Sunday with a grand tasting, which would all be hopefully inside something, inside, whether it's under a tent, at the community center, inside a winery, someplace that we wouldn't be strapped if it were to rain. And it would probably continue to be during the slower time of the year, March, April.
My other comment is that just from the outside, your new contract with Edelman seems fantastic to me. They're very professional, and I've been very impressed with what they've brought, not just as I'm a member of the Chamber from a business perspective, but from a town perspective of how they're promoting things in town and et cetera. So hopefully that is able to continue on, but that's been a very welcome change.
Yes, they've hit the ground running, and they've established those relationships with all of our stakeholders, some of the larger businesses, right down to some of the small retail shops, and they've developed good relationships with those businesses, and now they're really pushing the promotion.
Mm-hmm.
So I have two. That was it for you, correct? Yeah. Two areas I'd like you to touch base on. One is specifically in the budget, the town contract of about $240,000, and how that gets realized. If there are specific, like, does a lot of it go to Taste of Yountville, or does it get spread out over your entire list? That's my second question, so I can lead you into that one by my first question, which relates to the Yountville Arts effort, and what your impression is from the visitors and what you hear from your members about the impact that Yountville Arts has had on the visitor and the resident experience.
All of our members are very receptive to the public art. They're also receptive and willing to participate in all the events that the Yountville Arts Committee has been producing. So in terms of visitors, we hand out a lot of the public art walk brochures, and a lot of people are interested, surprised, and really enjoy the art walk. And we get, I would guess on average, 2 to 3 calls a week from people interested in the artists, interested in purchasing the art, interested in getting the art in their communities. And we, of course, refer them to the town.
Great. It's good to hear that there's some interaction going on.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And your second question with
Yeah, about
regard to
the town's commitment to the chamber
town's
budget. and
commitment.
What that means for residents and businesses.
Yeah, like I indicated in the little tiny budget snapshot, we are responsible, the town's contribution goes to operating the visitor center daily, 10 to 5. Of course, that's where the chamber offices are as well. And I'm usually there early in case just you need to talk to somebody about it. Just come to the visitor center, rap on the door. I'm usually there. So operating the Visitor Information Center daily, 365 days a year except for major holidays and chamber-sponsored events. Producing the events, and like I said, the events cost us about $121,000 plus to produce, and that includes lighting the town. We don't lump the lighting contract into our event contract or event budgets because it would obviously take away from the overall profitability of Festival of Lights. So that's a separate line item. And then, of course, we're responsible for hiring the outside PR and marketing firm. So we pay the Edelman contract. We also pay for a clip service, and we also pay for Newswire. So that is about that, along with advertising and other promotions, costs the chamber about $200,000. And then finally, a portion of that goes to operating expenditures and producing events. So Visitor Information Center, events, and public relations. That's where the bulk of the town funding goes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any more questions?
Any follow-up questions from Councilmember Dornbecker?
Having worked with you in the past, and it was always really fun, and worked on raising some money with the silent auction. But I wanted to find out if you're feeling that the trending for our street walk events has been trending downward. Is that true? That's my impression.
It hasn't really, but we need to move away from weather-dependent events. 2 years ago, Taste of Yountville, we drew about 8,000 people, and we ran out of everything by 1 o'clock. The last couple of years, we planned it so that it would rain all day long, freezing cold, dark, wind blowing, but nonetheless, we still succeeded. No, our efforts are towards moving away from weather-dependent events. If we can somehow conduct the event and maybe in a covered space that make it more comfortable for the event attendees and the vendors, we might be looking at a more successful event program. The street festivals are wonderful, but there's a time and a place for street festivals. And like the Walnut Creek Art and Wine Festival, it's a fantastic festival, but it happens in the summer. Same is true for the Sausalito Art and Wine Festival.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's really hard. We depend heavily on that revenue, and unfortunately, we're just meeting our budget and just barely making a profit off of those events.
I noticed on the approved budget for 2013, you're anticipating bringing in $25,000 in sponsorships.
That's, oh, did I cover that part? That budget that I read off to you, the revenue versus expenses for the 4 major areas, is reflecting some program changes, including increased membership dues, new marketing programming, professional staffing and training of the visitor center staff and volunteers, and a reformat of the Taste of Yountville by hiring a professional event production company. We're hoping that moving to this level of service, that this company, whoever they are, and we've got 3 in mind that we're sending the proposals to, will be able to generate that kind of sponsorship. And we're talking key sponsors like Mercedes, Lexus, Visa, American Express, that sort of thing.
And are you going to expect the event planning and production company to bring those sponsors with them?
Hopefully. They have the contacts. A couple of them have the contacts already. So it's our job, we're tasked with producing an event description that would bring that kind of sponsorship.
Oh, good
That's
luck.
our goal.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation, and again, welcome to Yountville.
Taste life here.
That's right. Thanks very much. Next up, from the Local Agency Formation Commission, we have a presentation, and I'm going to try to get these names right if I can. Is it Keen Simons,
That is outstanding. Thank you.
Executive Director, and is Brendan Freeman also an analyst with us here today?
Perfect. So,
You can thank the Vice Mayor for
well, I'm
feeding me that
glad
information.
he got that, and maybe not our tagline. I heard there was some discussion about that at the last meeting, but
That's right.
nonetheless,
the tagline?
we do. Another discussion. But thank you, Mayor Dunbar and council members. As mentioned, Keen Simons, Executive Officer with Napa County's Local Agency Formation Commission, or better known as LAFCO. And I'm joined both in the audience by Brendan Freeman, our analyst for the last few years, and of course our chairman is actually in attendance today, although he has his vice mayor hat on, Mr. Shilton. And Brendan is actually the project manager on the document that you have before you that I do want to just briefly share with the council. And that, of course, being Napa LAFCO's recently completed municipal service review, on countywide law enforcement services. A document that has been prepared in step, with LAFCO's mandate under state law, that we essentially serve as the legislature's eyes and ears in evaluating on a regular basis the adequacy, of local governmental services in all 58 counties in California, specifically as it relates to then informing and then facilitating what we hope is orderly and sustainable growth going forward. So with this broader context in mind, what I'd like to do is take just a few moments and highlight some of the key findings and recommendations that we ultimately made in our report on law enforcement services that at least I think have a direct or at least an indirect tie-in to the town of Yountville. And as I go through my narration, by all means, stop me with any questions or requests for a little more clarification. And if you have to glare, that's fine. I'll just stare back at Brendan. His performance review is coming up, so that's fine as well. Let me start off by noting that the municipal service review, and I believe all of you have a copy of it before you, this document is not a boiler template by any means. This was a document created by scratch, by staff, and it was unique for us because even though LAFCOs are in the business of preparing these studies every 5 years to look at the adequacy of local governmental services, this LAFCO, Napa, had never done a study like this where all we did, is look at the adequacy, the level, the range, and ultimately some performance issues as it relates to law enforcement. So it took a while, for the momentum to get built up, which helps to explain why we contacted your staff and the staffs of the other 5 affected agencies, the 4 other cities in the county of Napa, about a year ago when we started collecting the information. And then it took us about a year to actually get to the point where we produced a final report, and that's the document you have before you, which the Commission did accept, formally at its June 4th meeting. And in accepting that document, they also adopted all of the written determinations that you'll see in the executive summary, and there are about 100 of them, And these are the determinations that address all of the mandated factors that the legislature says, LAFCO, think about when you prepare these studies, and they range from us weighing in on what we see to be infrastructure needs or deficiencies to making our own growth and population projections for the affected communities. And as you go through the executive summary, okay, and the determinations, certainly some themes quickly emerge. And there are three in particular that I'm going to take just the next few minutes and highlight. And at the end of the day, I think they reflect Napa-LAFCO's independent take, okay, on the current and future state of law enforcement services countywide, and that certainly includes how they relate here in the town of Yountville. And I'll start off with, okay, a positive comment, and that is relative to everything that LAFCO considers, and based on our independent assessment, we certainly have concluded that law enforcement services today in Napa County for all 6 affected local agencies is responsive and is capacitized to provide a relatively high level of services throughout the 800 square miles that make up, okay, Napa County. So that's not lost on Napa-LAFCO. The baseline as it relates to now, in terms of meeting current community needs, is a good one. Okay, but there's a qualification to that statement. And the qualification is there are questions, okay, from Napa-LAFCO's perspective about the sustainability of law enforcement services in parts of this county going forward. In particular, okay, Napa-LAFCO asked literally $1 million question, which is, how are all of the affected agencies, Yountville, the other 4 cities in the county of Napa, going to be able to keep up with the escalating cost of law enforcement services, costs that, as you know, through your council duties, are primarily dependent on an ever-increasingly scarce source of general tax revenues, coupled with the fact that costs are not really driven by demands like a lot of other municipal services. They're more so driven by policy decisions that are often made by council and boards that are no longer in place and or for reasons that perhaps are no longer relevant or at least a priority. So you have a dynamic that is a bit off-putting. And perhaps said a little more directly through a variety of statements that you'll see in the executive summary, Napa-LAFCO is independently stating that there is a need, okay, for a long-term reconciliation to address this troubling dynamic in which at least 5 of the 6 local agencies, the exception being Calistoga, but that's just because they've been in mass cut mode over the last few years, but all agencies, with the exception of Calistoga, have had to dedicate more and more, okay, of the percentage of their available general tax revenue simply to cover cost increases relating to baseline law enforcement services, despite, okay, the fact that demands, at least as measured by crime totals, have actually declined in just about every jurisdiction with the exception of American Canyon. And so in our report and in our executive summary, we make reference to this dynamic as perhaps borrowing from Malcolm Gladwell, this emerging or looming tipping point, okay, in which we see that current service levels for law enforcement simply do not look sustainable going forward for a lot of our communities, and 2 in particular, and they're your neighbors to the north, Calistoga and Santa Elena. And this brings me to my last key comment that I want to share with the council, and again, I'd be happy to answer questions in a little bit, but that is Napa-LAFCO has included a very measured recommendation advising and encouraging your neighbors to the north, Calistoga and St. Helena, to start working together now on sharing law enforcement resources with 2 possible endpoints in our minds. Either develop a joint powers authority where you house law enforcement services under one administrative arm, and or take a page from your playbook and contract with a willing third-party provider. And that could be done individually or through a JPA. And this is a comment or a recommendation that certainly Napa-LAFCO spent a good amount of time thinking about. We appreciate that any time you bring up the idea, even the word consolidation as it relates to law enforcement, a lot of noise is generated in the room. And certainly we get that. And we spent time making sure that our comment was measured and on point. But it's something certainly we take seriously. And when the time comes, and it will be a question of when, not if, either Calistoga or St. Helena come to Napa-LAFCO with a boundary change, it will be on our minds. And that obviously is, under state law, our immediate leverage point in terms of seeing some of our recommendations go into action. Now, despite some resistance, memorialized in local newspapers from some officials about the idea of consolidating or at least merging resources, I certainly expect Calistoga and St. Helena to start working on alternate models to law enforcement services, both specific to their jurisdictions and within the region, in the near future. The economic realities suggest it's going to happen. Napa-LAFCO also believes, and this is coming from staff, that as St. Helena and Calistoga go through their exercise, it would be appropriate for not only Yountville, to monitor these discussions, but consider participating to the degree in which you believe there is benefit for your constituents. Now, this comment, is not to suggest Napa-LAFCO has prepared a study over the last year and has deduced that Yountville is in the same precarious position that we do see Calistoga and St. Helena in terms of being able to sustain law enforcement services. Not at all. In fact, our report suggests Yountville, out of all 6 affected local agencies, is in actually the best position, to maintain law enforcement services going forward because not only of your overall financial standing, but the inherent flexibility you have in your existing service contract with the county sheriff. That said, options have value. And one of the value points that we believe Yountville could benefit from a regional discussion on law enforcement services with your neighbors to the north is finding perhaps better cost certainty. And that comment is responding to the realities that you have had incurred a pretty sizable increase in your own cost in law enforcement. I think they've gone up about 50 or 60% over the last 5 years. That's a big jump. That's as big a jump as any local agency in Napa County. And Napa-LAFCO is not suggesting this is either an isolated anomaly or a troubling trend, but what we are suggesting is it does provide merit to the idea that it would make sense for you to explore your options, see if there are some, there is a synergy to be made with your neighbors to the north. And ultimately, in this particular case, perhaps 3 would not be a crowd. It might just make the event. And that's going to be a comment I'll take to, again, your neighbors to the north. I'm sure they'll have a little more of a scowl than this kind council will have. But with that, I would be happy to answer any questions you may have. Or, as you have time to digest this document, if you wish to transmit comments at a later date through your staff, we'd certainly be happy to accept those and share those with our commission. And finally, I do just want to compliment your staff who've been absolutely terrific in working with over the last year. There are a lot of great staffs in Napa County. Yours is right up there. So with that, thank you so much, Mayor and Council.
Thank you. Any specific questions or comments? Well, prior to that, we'll hear from the Vice Mayor/Chair.
First of all, thank you, Keen. I just wanted to make a couple of comments, more maybe Yountville specific. First of all, this will be the easiest of all 6 presentations you make, so enjoy it while it lasts. I think it's interesting, this is a very large document, is to recognize the many different service delivery methods that do exist in the county. Calistoga, St. Helena, the city of Napa all have their own complete law enforcement divisions, departments. The City of American Canyon is like ours, where they contract with the county sheriff, but their contract is not as all-inclusive as ours. They essentially provide staffing. They jointly select a police chief. They have sergeants. They have more of a department than we do. And we're really the kind of the fully integrated, fully consolidated, if we want to use that very popular term, situation. What's amazing to me is to look at other jurisdictions, I won't name them, and as you talk about the fiscal reality of maintaining a police department, which Steve has always said this, what it would cost our town to do on our own is cost prohibitive, and I'm being nice about that. You have the situation of people who say, we've got our own police department, we like having it that way, and it almost sometimes doesn't matter that there are perfect examples within our own county, and we work very well within our own county, of models that are cheaper that, in my opinion, probably work better, but dang it, we have our own system and we're not going to give it up. And I think what's interesting is fiscal reality is taking hold, and over, it won't be the next 1 year or 2 years, but maybe over the next 5 or 10, there's going to be harder choices that people have to make. And I think that's really the goal of this document, is to help guide that thought process of, as people go down that road and think, oh, we don't want to talk to each other. Well, you may want to think about it, because you're going to have to at some point. And I think we have a great relationship with Napa Sheriff, and we get a lot of things from them we could never provide on our own, and hopefully that provides a model that others can go for. And I do want to comment, I know, kind of gave the look to Steve, we have a fairly new contract with the Sheriff's Department, which does give us more cost certainty and lower percentage increases than we've seen in the past. So that has been an issue that has been addressed over the past year or so. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Mueller?
Yeah, I have a
Sorry,
question.
could you just pull that mic toward you so we can get you on? Thank you.
Very, very nice report. It was very comprehensive and easy to understand. And I have a question about Yountville and our increase in rates over the last 5 years. So since we contract our services, the percent of law enforcement monies that we spend is a much smaller percent of our budget than the Up Valley cities that you referred to. Although their increases for the last 5 years have been much smaller, they still take up a lot of the general fund budget. And what you referred to in here was part of the reason, especially in the past, maybe it's been corrected now, are these county administrative pass-through fees that we need to be very aware of. Can you just tell me a little bit of what you meant by that?
Well, certainly, and I'll preface my comments, Council Member, on the idea that pass-throughs are what they are. We have pass-throughs when we subcontract out or provide services for other entities. The county does that with LAFCO as well. We take on their pass-throughs. What we were particularly honing in on in the document is the premise is, hey, everyone who contracts out does so to a degree to create that cost certainty. And when we went through the numbers, when you see a 50% jump in cost, it gets your attention. I'm not here to say the cost increases that were directly attributed to pass-throughs were valid or invalid, but they were large, and they merited at least some scrutiny by LAFCO to at least highlight. And I think we have a determination in the report that actually is directed at the County of Napa to direct them to look at the way in which they calculate their pass-throughs, because at a certain point, and this happened, I believe, in Citrus Heights in Sacramento, who historically had contracted with the county. At a certain point, if you keep jumping the ante in terms of the cost of contracting, an agency is inherently going to say, we will go alone, or go it alone. And that's what happened in Citrus Heights. So our comment to the county was, beware of the Citrus Heights syndrome, where at a certain point, Yountville or American Canyon may decide it's more appropriate, given all things considered, to go alone. And we certainly think that the county has a good system in play, and we would like to see, in fact, the possibility of them contracting with either a JPA or individually the cities to the north view. But it is an issue.
Thanks.
Other questions?
I did have one, yes, please. And that is, why would you think it would be more advantageous for Yountville to partner with our Up Valley neighbors?
I think it would be advantageous to explore whether there would be benefit in partnering in a regional law enforcement setting for two particular reasons. By going through the exercise, and part of that exercise is understanding that Calistoga and St. Helena are going to have to go through it. So you might have the ability to participate in a discussion that's going to happen whether you initiate it or not. And it will provide two possible outcomes, both with value. Either you validate your baseline and you realize, having gone through the exercise, you know what, our system in place makes sense for us, and this exercise has affirmed that, or you identify there may be a superior or preferred alternative that came up. So, again, it's not suggesting that you go through an actual reorganization where you bring your law enforcement services together. It's a comment to start the discussion to see if there's benefit to going forward.
And yet, didn't you just a few minutes ago say that you were thinking that it would probably be the county that our neighbors to the north should partner with as well as we do?
There's certainly a possibility. I mean, there's a lot of endpoints that could come out of the discussion. A scenario could be Calistoga and St. Helena enter into a JPA in contract with the county. That contract could have more economies of scale, potentially, if it has a third party to it. That's an option to at least merit discussion.
Thank you.
2 points I wanted, I'd like to get comment from you on. One, is there a concern about a monopoly of service where, without the competitive situation that exists now in the county, where we need to, the county sheriff's department needs to recognize that they need to put a very reasonable product before us for us to be willing to sign on that contract line? Do you think creating potentially one universal law enforcement provider would actually work negatively, that they wouldn't be compelled to they basically say we're the only sheriff in town, literally, and you have to take whatever we throw on the table? It almost sounds like it could negatively impact our leverage.
Certainly, and that could be a consideration as to why there would be a con towards going all in under that scenario, all going under the county model. I guess it would be up to individual jurisdictions to weigh the pros and cons of does the contract that you enter into have sufficient controls and checks to allow you to amend the contract as needed to create a more beneficial cost point for the agency. Well, yeah, I'd leave it at that. That's a very good comment, Mayor Dunbar. It's not something that we highlighted as a concern. I think our focus was simply and most specifically on looking at the sustainability of law enforcement services overall. The existing model, at least to the north of you, we respectfully do not believe is going to work much longer. And so given options are only those that are really attainable, one of the core options is either a joint powers authority or a contract with the county.
Right.
Either one has merit.
The other point, if you could comment, has to do with realignment. And do you analyze that impact on Napa County with what's happening now with realignment, with county jails needing to take on more inmates versus prisons, with early release, with changes in who's being arrested? That can have county implications, more so than, hopefully, specifically here in Yountville. But as you look at this broader service level, do you factor in the current realignment?
No. The realignment occurred so late in the game relative to our report, there really wasn't any substantive analysis that could say one way or the other what would be the impact, other than say it could be an impact. We need to focus in on it. But we didn't have a conclusion one way or the other given the date.
Okay. Maybe an appendix. Any other questions or comments about the presentation? Thanks very much for the report and
Thank you for your
being
time.
with us
Thank you.
tonight. And good luck up Valley. Next up, a presentation, a proclamation designating July as Parks and Recreation Month, and I will invite our Parks and Community Services Director, Samantha Holland Wagner, to join me at the podium. Thank thank you for representing all things Parks and Rec. So I will read to you a proclamation designating July as Parks and Recreation Month. Whereas parks and recreation programs are an integral part of communities throughout this county and the country, including the town of Yountville. Whereas our parks and recreation are vitally important to establishing and maintaining the quality of life in our communities, ensuring the health of all citizens, and contributing to the economic and environmental well-being of a community and region. And, excuse me. And whereas parks and recreation programs build healthy, active communities that aid in the prevention of chronic disease, provide therapeutic recreation services for those who are mentally or physically disabled, and also improve the mental and emotional health of all citizens. And whereas parks and recreation programs increase a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas parks and recreation areas are fundamental to the environmental well-being of our community. And whereas parks and natural recreation areas improve water quality, protect groundwater, prevent flooding, improve the quality of the air we breathe, provide vegetative buffers to development, and produce habitat for wildlife. And whereas our parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And whereas the U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Recreation Month, and whereas the town of Yountville recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, John F. Dunbar, Mayor, on behalf of the Yountville Town Council, do hereby proclaim the month of July as Parks and Recreation Month in the town of Yountville.
Thank you very much on behalf of my staff. It's a big month for us in our Parks and Community Services Commission. And I'd just like to invite you all to come out in July and every day and celebrate Parks and Recreation Month and take a class. Come on an excursion, come to one of our events, which we're having a movie night, which is in celebration of July's Parks and Recreation Month on July 20th, Friday, a family movie night. Visit one of our parks, walk on our beautiful trails, ride your bike on the Vine Trail. Those are all terrific things to remind you and help you celebrate July's Parks and Recreation Month. So thank you very much.
I believe that's going to be Moneyball, is that right?
Actually, Moneyball is this Friday.
Oh, this Friday.
Right, which is our more adult-oriented evening with food and beverages. So Moneyball is this Friday.
Great. Vice Mayor, did you have a comment?
I just want to make a comment, because usually when we make comments, nobody's here, and everybody at home is falling asleep. But I just want to say that we get updates, and the Yountville Summer Camp for the kids just started, I guess, last Monday, and I know enrollment is like off the chart, rock and roll, so congratulations. That I know there's been some big changes and listening to the community, and I was really happy to see, and my kids weren't even there, so I've got 2 more to add next week. So it's great to see that success starting off at the beginning of that program, so congratulations.
And the pool is open. Great. Yeah, it helps to have 100-degree temperatures. Great. Well, thank you, and congratulate the entire staff. I appreciate it, the whole team. Thank you. Okay, those are our presentations for this evening. We're going to move on to our first public hearing, Summerston Wine Tasting Room Master Development Plan Amendment, and I believe we have a couple disclaimers to read before we get into this. We'll start with Councilmember Hall.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Dunbar. I've consulted with the town attorney and has advised me that while the discussion on wine tasting regulations within the town of Yountville will have no direct impact upon the operations of my employer, Cliff Lady Vineyards, to the extent that there may be indirect impacts upon my employer, these economic impacts are not significant enough under the regulations of the FPPC to result in my disqualification. At this time, I like to participate, but am required to disclose that I am a employee of Cliff Lady Vineyards, serving as its Vice President of Finance.
Thank you for that clarification. Also, Vice Mayor?
Yeah, before we begin, I want to disclose that I am the co-owner of the Yountville Deli, which leases space on Washington Street in Yountville, 6498 Washington Street. 6498 Washington Street is within 500 feet of the applicant's business. After consultation with the town attorney and receiving written advice from the Fair Political Practices Commission on April 7th, 2011, we have determined that this action tonight does not have a direct impact on my leasehold interest or a reasonably foreseeable material impact on my business entity. As a result, I will participate in this item. Thank you.
Thank you. And apparently, reading of the disclaimers really impacted our in-house crowd.
It's all your fault.
But
All that to say we're here.
thank you. Yeah, thank you for those clarifications. Let's move on to our staff report, please.
Good evening. This is a request by Summerston Wine Tasting Room to add the Thursday night live summer outdoor music, food, and wine event at the space, and it will be a seasonal activity on Thursday evenings between mid-June and through September between the hours of 6:30 and 9 p.m. The main component of the event is live music, where local musicians would be stationed in the courtyard, and music will be either acoustic or amplified, and the types of music that the applicant intends to bring in are blues and jazz, classical, and folk type music. The other component of the event is the consumption of food and wine, and that would be wine by the glass or bottle, as well as limited food options prepared by an off-site caterer, perhaps also including food trucks. The staff report details the history of the site, and back in '09, Summerston received the tasting room for the wine tasting room use, and the conditions of approval, the related ones are included in the staff report. Those generally limit the wine tasting use to a wine tasting size pour. There are special events that are permitted for a total of 24, and the consumption of prepared food and wine by the glass or bottle is restricted to these special events. Wine tasting and consumption is permitted outdoors, with the exception of the rooftop terrace, but no service is allowed, and the outdoor areas are available for use until dark. Summerston opened in June of 2010, and that first summer it conducted a Thursday night live music event, and the staff issued a special event permit and an amplified sound permit for that event. In January of 2011, staff conducted a 6-month review of the use and reported to council, and the Thursday Night Live series was specifically evaluated, and the council expressed support for that event as long as each event was to count toward one of their special events, of which they were permitted 20 minor special events up to 25 people and 4 major special events of up to 50 people. In June of 2011, Summerston approached staff asking for approval to hold the event again, and based on the council feedback at that 6-month review, we let them know there were essentially 3 options. You can hold the event as part of the wine tasting use, but that would limit the consumption of food and wine. You could not serve catered food or wine by bottle or glass, so it was essentially an extension of the daily use with acoustic music. Another option was to hold the event, but to limit the attendance and count each of these toward the 24 special events that they were already permitted. This would allow the amplified music, prepared food, and consumption of wine by the glass or bottle. This was not the applicant's preferred alternative because each of the Thursday Night Live events would eat away at their limited 24 special events. And while the applicant indicates they're not using their full allotment of events, they state that they're in the early stages of operation and they'd like to develop that more and to reserve those for private parties and wine events as it was originally envisioned. So the other option was to amend the permit to add the Thursday Night Live event as a new and special category of special event. And this was the only option that really would allow the applicant to conduct the event as they envision it. Since they had approached staff late in the game last year, they elected to cancel the event, and so we didn't see it last year, but they are seeking the amendment this year to hold the event this summer. And so, as I mentioned, live music is one of the main components of the event, and whether it's acoustic or amplified, the issue is ensuring that sound levels are in compliance with the town's noise ordinance. And if the history of the first year is any example, there should be little impact if they conduct the event appropriately. We did have one complaint that first year, but we used the sound meter in the applicant's presence and used it as an opportunity to educate them on what sound levels are at property boundaries. It was the last event of the season, so we haven't had a chance to test it from there. But based on those events, we're able to suggest the conditions that we're suggesting as conditions of approval. And one is to position the speakers so that they're inward facing on the property and not directed to the residents to the east. And also to take measures to avoid the sound bouncing off the walls. Another is to educate the musicians about the town's noise ordinance and the need to keep levels low, with the provision that you may need to dial back the sound and turn it down if it proves to be too loud and they're requested at the request of the applicant. Another is that staff would ask the applicant to inform us of the first amplified event of the season so that we can take the sound meter, do the measurements, inform them of what those measurements are, and this will help ensure that the remaining events will be in compliance with the code. Another component of the event is wine consumption by the glass or bottle, and as I mentioned, this is limited as part of the daily. This is restricted for the daily wine tasting use, so it's as a special event that this component could be allowed. The applicant's requesting that wine consumption be allowed at all the outdoor areas, and that includes the rooftop terrace. And staff notes that the ABC has approved this component of the use, and that's because wine tasting room staff monitors the terrace through a video loop of the terrace inside the tasting room. Another component of the event is the prepared food, and as with the wine tasting, this is not allowed as part of the daily use. That's limited to simple wine and food pairings, and catering is limited to special events. And in this case, the applicant is seeking or requesting permission to serve limited menu options, which is a step up from the first year when they just offered the single item, generally an item prepared on a barbecue. And this could include the use of food trucks, which generally have short menus. And a food truck would be parked either on the street frontage or in the parking lot, so it has the potential of taking one or more of the parking spaces for the duration of the event. So staff is suggesting some conditions of approval that would mitigate this potential impact, and one would be to submit a parking plan to address the loss of parking each time a food truck is present on the site. And if the truck is parked in the lot, it could be requiring employees at these events to park off-site. If it's at the street frontage, it would require an encroachment permit from the town, but it would be specific to each event, and they would need to address the loss. Specific to this condition is the ongoing review and monitoring of the food truck use to see whether there are any unmitigated significant impacts. And if there are, we're reserving the right to perhaps eliminate this component of the use. We also think that the applicant should create a parking policy specific to the Thursday night event as to where employees should or shouldn't park, whether they should carpool, perhaps having signage directing customers or guests of alternate spots in town, and creating ongoing monitoring and reporting back to staff. And we ask that they submit this final plan to staff. So staff is supportive of the use presented by the applicant, but we are suggesting review at the end of the first season with reporting to council in the case that there are any significant impacts that need to be addressed. And at that point, there would be an opportunity to sort of scale back the components of this event if that's necessary.
Great, thanks for that report. Any questions about the report? Councilmember Hall?
I have a couple things, Sandra. How do the existing 24, so it's the 20 minor and the 4 special or major events, how do they get counted? I mean, do we get a report from the owner that says, we're going to have this event, and
Right.
go ahead and document number 1?
We were kind of new when we first started this process, so we weren't requiring a reporting. We are asking the wine tasting rooms to voluntarily report, and with this applicant coming back in, we've included a condition that they report to us, and it can be in a casual email fashion prior to each event so that we know they're occurring, and we're creating a tally and a log to review them.
So then what they're actually suggesting here, and if I understand correctly, because it's seasonal and every season has a different number of Thursdays, I'm guessing
Right.
maybe by 1 or 2 a year, they're potentially adding up to 16, I'm going to say 16 events, major or minor, we're not exactly sure because we don't know how many people are going to attend, but they're requesting to add basically 16 events per year. Is that correct?
To the 24, so
40.
usually 40.
Yeah,
year long.
that's my math. Okay. Just a quick question on the wine consumption. So are they going to continue pouring tastes during the time, or is it your understanding that they're going to continue to taste wine for guests who don't necessarily want to buy a whole glass or want to buy a
I
whole
would think
bottle?
that could certainly occur. There's the wine tasting bar inside. People may want to do that. They even may want to bring it outside. It would just loosen the restriction that they couldn't serve wine by the bottle.
We know the ABC in California has allowed people who go to wine tasting rooms, if they want to buy a glass of wine or a bottle, they can do that. But this is in addition to, because
Right.
some of
I'd
people
imagine
want
we'd
to say, I
see a
just
little
want to
bit of
taste.
all of it, right?
So it's more difficult to enforce and monitor, right? Yeah. And then lastly, with regards to the parking plan, so is it your expectation or in your discussion with the, I think we'll probably hear from them, but is it your understanding that you're actually going to get a real parking plan? And is this going to evolve every event because they're going to have a different type of purveyor of food? I mean, how is that
We're
going to
asking
occur?
for 2 different things for them. One is to create general parking policies for the Thursday night event, and that's a plan we're asking them to submit and train their employees and have that as an ongoing type thing. The other relates specifically to the food truck, and since the food truck parking location could vary, we're asking for a specific plan for each of those events, depending on whether it's in the parking lot or on the street, and devising different methods to minimize the parking impact.
So what is really being presented here is evaluating the entire use permit as it exists today for the whole project.
Well, the use permit, yes, is up for your review, but they're asking for an addition to that permit, and that's really the focus of tonight's meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Muller, questions?
Yes, thank you. I have some questions. The rooftop terrace, as I recall, is open space. Is that correct? And some of the front area, too?
Right.
So do we allow other wine tasting rooms to have special events in open space?
Yes. Maison Henri is the first one that comes to mind. That whole patio garden area is their open space, and that's where they regularly hold many events. Girard, the patio out front, is also considered their open space, and you're allowed to do wine tastings out there.
Okay. And the rooftop terrace, it's not ADA accessible, so how do we deal with that with public events?
There's what is known as equivalent accommodations, and if there's an outdoor space at ground level that's accessible, that meets the ADA standard.
So people in wheelchairs or some of the older population really couldn't go up to the rooftop terrace for those
Yeah,
events?
that's right, because there's not access.
Okay, and in terms of our 20 minor events and 4 major events, is that the standard right now with all the wine tasting rooms, or does it vary a lot?
It varies based on their representation of how they'd like to build their business.
So do some have a lot more, a little more, and is this pretty much the maximum for everybody right now that we have?
No, but I can't give you an exact number because I didn't look into that specifically. I know that there's quite a range of diversity between what the different tasting rooms offer.
Okay, so some tasting rooms...
And 40 would not be so outrageous as a high
Total?
number, right.
Total, okay.
If I could add to that, when the council's considered the various requests, in part, it's what the applicant has asked in terms of their business model. Some are more involved in having the smaller private events and things, which is typically, that's why we have those smaller. They use the private tasting rooms and they have a more intimate experience. Secondly, not all of our facilities are equal. They are very significantly different, and not all of the facilities really allow for different kind of uses. So that's why in this particular case, the council, in their past decisions, have found a very flexible approach to what the applicant and the site location allow.
Okay, that takes care of my questions for now, thanks.
Questions to staff, Councilmember Dornbeck.
Is there any reason why we couldn't institute a permit requirement for minor special events like this, so that that all of the tasting rooms, when they have a sort of special event like this, that it might have an impact in sound or, on the public paths and things? Wouldn't it make sense to have that so that we could monitor, number one, how many that you're having, and number two, it wouldn't have to be expensive or anything, but it would sort of act as a way to monitor, officially.
I'm not quite sure what you're asking, if it's staff being able to monitor the number and dates of these events. We are moving more in that direction with tasting rooms, and they're voluntarily submitting that information to us before the event.
And let me provide also one clarification. We do require anything that is labeled that special event, the large special event, over 50 or with amplified sound, they are required to submit and go through our special event permit process. So some of the activities that the tasting rooms are doing when they meet that size criteria, we do have a formal process. What we're really finding is that we need to do a better job of understanding the minor and coming up with some type of a check-in. And we're trying to, meet with the tasting room industries to come up with something that allows that. Staff also does a fair amount of time spending some time monitoring websites and promotional activities, because most of these folks are pretty good at telling us what they're doing indirectly. So there are some tools that our staff uses. We also want to be fair and flexible, and we recognize that this is an evolving discussion, and we're trying to get it right. And that's a hard thing to say, because it is kind of critical. Here you have a unique component where we also received a lot of public support for the event, because it created something to do that was, not incredibly expensive. So we're trying to balance some of those components in an evolving state. But we do have, I want to make sure everybody here knows, anything over 50 involving sound or a parking management plan does currently require. Now, I am going to be honest with you and say staff's had a disappointing situation on occasion where we've had to go have conversations with applicants and tasting rooms that didn't obtain the appropriate permits. So that's an educational issue that we're working on more comprehensively. And also, as you know, you've asked us to be more diligent in that area, and we have. So with that, that being said, this applicant has, after a couple conversations, has been working very well with staff in terms of advising and consulting us with what they're doing at their business.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor, any questions of the staff report?
Just a couple. I'm looking at the resolution, and you made a comment. I just want to confirm it, because I think the way it's laid out on the conditions, where we've got item 2, and then there's the subsections of that. So I just want to confirm, again, that when you talk about the consumption of wine by glass or bottles permitted in the site's facilities, that only flows up to this section 2, which is this 16 special events.
Correct.
Okay. 2 other questions. You have in here, amplified music is permitted. And then item 3 says that it's important to keeping sound levels in general compliance with the noise ordinance. When we issue an amplified noise or music permit, is that person still required to keep within the noise ordinance
Yes.
requirements? Okay. So that's in any situation, I assume?
Correct.
Okay. My last question had to do with item 10, I guess it's 2.10, under the conditions. It talked about any significant impact shall be reported to the council, and the council shall have the potential of adjusting any elements of the event to mitigate impact. I guess my question is, you have structured, I would say, a set of restrictions that require working with staff and having reasonable, accommodation. I'm speaking of this hypothetically, not in any specific example, of what if there isn't reasonable accommodation and, working together on some of these things does not work out. Is this language clear enough? Maybe the town attorney can say, is this language clear enough that you could come back and say, hey, we said you could have consumption by the bottle on the terrace, but you're not really doing what you said you were going to do. We don't want that in there forever. This is a two-way street. So is there a review period, something like that, that allows some flexibility?
We believe so, and I'll let Andrew comment more directly, because I'll bring your attention to the fact that, first, it is a requirement for a review, and it allows that the council shall have the potential of adjusting any elements of the event to mitigate impacts. One of those actions is eliminating or not allowing them to do the action that was causing or potentially causing the problem.
So when you say elements of the event, is that referring to Thursday Night Live special events? Is
Correct.
That what you mean? Okay.
And the council would retain jurisdiction regardless of whether this condition is in there or not. This condition, however, very forcefully reiterates that that these are able to be modified if an issue were to arise in the future.
Okay.
And it's very clear the intent is to avoid conflict with other parts of the town code. Indeed, if you were to, in the noise ordinance in particular, have a violation there, you would want to have, for enforcement purposes, both reference in this document as well as a general code issue as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. I do have a couple questions. I want to clarify. On the bottom of page 3 of 6 in your report, you address, in the second sentence, the council indicated, this is at a previous council meeting, it would allow the food, music, wine event as long as each event was counted toward the special event allocation. So this is a request to change that. This is a request to say, no, these are 16 more events.
Correct.
And then continuing down there, events not to exceed 25 people. And are you saying that the request is to maintain 25 people maximum at all of these Thursday Night Live events?
The concern at the time was that special events, the 20 minor were only allowed up to 25 people. So in order to, be in conformance with their use permit, that limitation was imposed. This opens opportunity to allow a greater attendance.
So this is an unlimited attendance request anyway?
Essentially, yes.
Open, public,
Right.
no limit on capacity other than the fire marshal,
Yeah.
basically?
Not having to
Okay.
turn away attendees at the door. That's the whole idea.
Right. Okay. And you highlighted here about there still would be a restriction on table service. Is that accurate?
Correct.
So that all beverage ordering or tasting would have to happen down in the tasting room. Any food purchasing would happen however they would be doing it, whether internally
Right.
or if a food truck component is authorized.
They'll have point-of-sale transactions, and those will be both indoors and out. The first season that they held the event, there was sort of a wine dispensing area that was just outside the door near the courtyard, so the same concept would apply to this.
So an
And-
adjusted point of sale to what they have existing, but still controlled, sort of, and that's satisfactory to you?
Yes.
Staff. Okay, and then just a general question, there are a lot of pieces to this proposal, and it sounds to me like this is almost a à la carte. We look at this and craft this as, if we accept it at all, pick and choose which pieces we're most comfortable with, if not all of them. An example being the food component. If there's agreement that food component is authorized, but maybe not a food truck component to that food, or
Or menu
acoustic
options.
wine, or acoustic music versus amplified music. We may determine that under this Thursday Night Live, it needs to be non-amplified. So there are different things that we need to evaluate. Okay. That's for my clarification mostly, but maybe it helps everybody else. With that, I'll formally open the public hearing part and invite our applicant to kick us off with comments and maybe some clarification to the questions you've heard. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff. My name is Craig Becker, Town Manager at Summerston. And I'd like to go over kind of how we ended up here tonight. But I also need to discuss the 800-pound gorilla in the room. You know, where's the grocery? That is in the works. And we've been around for 4 years as a company. We've built a winery and tasting rooms, and we're selling wine in 20 states and 7 foreign countries. Been really busy, and opening up a food-type venue in Yountville, not to mention, is a lot of pressure. It's taken a lot of thought in how we do this, and a lot of consideration for our business and what works well for our business. So with that said, we've kind of approached a kind of a business decision that we're going to be seeking an outside partner for this to fully execute the concept of the grocery, somebody that's done it before, which is great because we're good at growing grapes and making wine. And that's something that's happened relatively recently. I do have a new staff, marketing. We have a new tasting room manager that starts next week. So all kinds of fun changes as we grow and continually build our business. It is true what we're looking to do is to add to our marketing plan, but to make it really clear, these were not profitable events. So from a business decision, it doesn't make sense to give away a potential profitable event for a non-profitable event. And that's why we chose not to take either the small 25 and under people event approach, which costs money, or use up 4 of our large permits. So in 2010, we had 1 permit for all the events. We were approved to taste wine and listen to music in all the areas outside. We did have 1 location outside to buy wine. Music was outside. We tried to direct it away from the residents, but I guess we did have 1 issue. And, you know, Sandra, the town, worked with us on that to correct that. Most events had more than 50 people, not at one time, obviously, but that, again, doesn't qualify us for the small event use permit. And then light food was supplied by a licensed caterer. So basically, 2010 was successful, but not profitable. We lost about an average of $200 per event. So really doesn't make sense for us to do that. So in 2011, when we approached the town, it was clear that we weren't going to use our small event permits because it doesn't make sense to trade non-profitable events for potentially profitable events. We are a for-profit winery. Also, in 2011, we knew that we would, if we use the small events, we would have too many people and therefore be in violation of our permit. So that being said, as a new business, it's taken time to get to understand how do these small event permits work. And late last year and early this year, working with both Steve and Sandra, we realized that we were almost overly conservative, you know, pulling a small event permit for 25 and under, paying a fee, which we actually don't have to do that. It's actually cost prohibitive for most parties to spend $250 on a permit for a group of 12 wanting to have catered food, and that would trigger one of our small event permits. So that being said, I think Summerston's done well complying, trying to work with the staff, keeping the communication channels open. So for going forward for Thursday Night Live, like I mentioned, you know, it wasn't just us coming to the town. The town came to us and said, hey, this is a positive event. Would you be interested in doing it again? The community came to us and said, well, it doesn't seem like it would work, except for this approach to maybe add it to our use permit. So that being said, if this did go forward, what we need as a business would be to maintain this as an open event, open to the public. We must be able to use all the outdoor areas to hold. The rooftop terrace is completely underused, so it's fun to use it once in a while. We must be able to sell wine by the glass and the bottle. That helps generate revenue. Hopefully we can break even. We'd like to pay for one special event permit and amplified music permit for the series. We feel that a minimum of 8 events makes sense for marketing purposes, so if we were to do this, we need a minimum of 8 so that we can market, advertise, and spread that cost out over all the events. We want these events added to our current marketing plan because we're happy with the 24 that we have now. And we feel that food's an important part. If you're drinking wine, not tasting, you need something to eat. And in terms of the parking plan, we hope to be parking a lot of bicycles and a lot of tennis shoes because it is a local event. And most people don't drive, but we certainly can work with staff to develop a plan. Any questions?
Questions of the applicant? Councilmember Hall, if you're ready.
Yeah. Hi, thank you for sharing that. So you said that you guys are already fulfilling or completing the 24 events. So is that correct? Is that what I understood from?
We're not full, no, but we're working towards it.
Okay, so you're already utilizing those permits, meaning that I'm just trying to get it from a business perspective here. You don't want to burn 8, 16, whatever of these Thursday Night Live on permits that you already have in your existing use permit.
Correct, yes.
Okay. And that makes sense to me.
I mean, if these were huge revenue generators, it'd be a different story.
Yeah,
but at 25, that's a very limited number of people. And people do still taste a lot, so you have to sell a lot of tastings. And those 25 people are going to be walking crooked home if that's the case. So the idea is to kind of make it a little more casual. You can enjoy some wine or not, or enjoy music. That's the main focus.
Mm-hmm. And I appreciate that. So I just wanted to make sure I understood that. I guess the one concern I have, at least on its face, and whether it's valid or not is kind of my issue, or maybe one that you can address. I'm concerned that from the period of July to September, you book 40 events in a 4-month period. And then, not necessarily that's my issue or the issue that's at hand here, but all of those compacted into those 4 months, and then the neighbors behind or whomever are dealing with noise and sound for every night of the week, 10, 12 weeks out of the year. And can you address that? Do you expect that would ever be the case? I know you have people book, they're here during season, and that's when it's going to be busy. I respect that, but now we're putting 40 events within a 6 or 12-week period. That's a lot of events. How would you respond to that, just out of curiosity?
Well, first of all, the large events, we have to get approval from staff, so that's
but the other 20?
So the other 20, most of what we've used those for group of 12, the want to have catered food inside our VIP room. There's been some interest to do something on the rooftop terrace. I understand your point. I don't think I can directly answer that question because it hasn't happened. But I think it's a matter of communicating with staff, prior to signing any contracts or, checking in with them, making sure things are okay, keeping that direct line open.
Yeah, and I was going to commend from what I've been able to ascertain from the report that was written and just in the general communications going on tonight. It appears that you guys have been very communicative about what you're anticipating you would like to do, and that's helpful to all of us. So that's all my questions for the applicant for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Mueller, questions? Councilmember Dornbecker, questions?
Hello, Mr. Becker. Thank you for coming. And I was wondering, you mentioned that you would want to have a minimum of 8. Would you be opposed if we set a maximum of 12? Would that work for you?
Yeah, the number 8 comes from a marketing plan, so that when we do advertising, those costs for each event are significantly lower than if it was approved for 4. You have to advertise and let the community know we're doing it. So we're open. It's a discussion. I just think that number 8 for us is kind of the minimum.
Well, I think that one of the concerns that the council has is that if there are, 22 Thursday nights, and so it might make it feel more comfortable for us if we could say, okay, a minimum of 8, but a maximum of something.
Sure.
And if we could work with you on that, you'd be amenable to that.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor, any questions of the applicant? I just have a couple that I'd like to follow up, kind of an extension of the staff comments about the food components and your threshold. I understand what you're requesting is kind of a broad flexibility, whether it be catered like you've done in the past or expanding to more of a mobile vendor concept. Is that a wish list? Is that it's in our marketing plan that if we don't have that kind of flexibility, the trends are telling us that the food truck is the way to do it, and we're going to see 16 food trucks coming through. What is maybe expand on your marketing plan a little bit more regarding to the food component?
So we're, like everybody else, we're seeing the food truck question pop up. It's really diverse. It's easy. They pull in, they pull out. There's a big diversity there. I mean, we're open to the discussion just because we did do an event that had a food truck, and it was very successful. It was a private event. One of the issues with catering is trying to keep the cost down. So caterers typically want to have a minimum charge, and if we don't hit that, then we have to pay for that, versus a food truck can use whatever means necessary. They're going to have a menu and sell food, and they drive away. So it's great. I mean, again, because this isn't a huge revenue thing for Somerston, it's opening to the public. It's focusing on the locals, giving them a chance to come and taste wine. We're open to it. But the catering part, very few caterers will want to come and offer, let's say, a little lamb burger and coleslaw, and not try to charge you $18. To me, that's not. I wouldn't pay that, so I don't want to have that. Whereas, with food trucks, you get a big diversity of options. I'm not saying that's the only way. The catering route's a little more difficult.
Okay. Just so you understand, the reason for my question is I'm very sensitive to negatively impacting our restaurant community as it stands right now. And when you ramp up from more of a small bite component to what can be considered a full menu option, your guest goes from hanging out, having some wine, and going to dinner to hanging out and having dinner. And so that does have an impact on our other businesses that already exist. So that's kind of where I'm at with the different levels of food options that you're requesting here, especially adding up to 16 nights to your 24 already. So that's where I'm coming from on that.
What we noticed in 2010, especially with the lamb burgers, is people go back and have 3 of them. And I guess we could police that by saying you're allowed to go by once, but that's not realistic. It's kind of difficult.
That's like saying you can only have half a glass of wine, and we're going to take your ticket and you can never come back. We know reality is not there. Another question about your threshold, the acoustic versus amplified music. Do you feel is that a deal breaker for you in your application, that because of the venue, the size crowd potentially, that if it's not amplified that it doesn't work?
I think the vocals would be the threshold of not doing it. I think most musicians enjoy acoustical music, but often the vocals need to be amplified, and we're not talking super loud, but I think that would be a threshold.
And is your plan to have the music in the courtyard all the time, or is the opportunity to have the music inside your tasting room so that there's a natural buffer of that sound?
We're open for a discussion on that. It's been in the courtyard in the past. We've done acoustical music inside for different events, and it's been good too.
Okay. Those are my questions so far. So thank you for your presentation. I'll invite other members of the public, if they'd like to speak on this item tonight. Is there anybody that would like to comment? Yes, Ms. Osserman?
Cindy Sosserman, speaking on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce. I was really excited to know that the applicant was coming back for this use permit amendment, because so often we get visitors coming into the information center looking for something to do. What can we do? After they've checked into their hotel, of course we're going to send them to one of our amazing restaurants. But afterwards they're looking for a little live entertainment, just about anything. And basically all we've been able to recommend prior to this is maybe they should stop by Ponch's later on and have a drink and maybe shoot some pool. this is a wonderful option for the visitors, and I fully support it. I hope that you'll approve this resolution. Speaking as a private citizen, and I know some of you have attended these Thursday night conferences or concerts, and I know I have really enjoyed it. It was very well managed, very well maintained. The food offering was great. I'm kind of disappointed to hear that they're not going to continue it. But again, as Mr. Becker said, that's an option that's up for discussion. Parking, I don't think is going to be a critical issue because it's a locals event. And you'll see a lot of local people attending. And most of the people who aren't are probably staying in our hotels or visiting our restaurants and having dinner and coming over after dinner. So it's a wonderful opportunity for Yountville to provide some evening activity for the visitors and the locals. I fully support it, and I hope you will too. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your input. Any other members of the public? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing portion of this item and bring the discussion back to council. Any member like to begin the discussion? Councilmember Dornbecker, how about you tonight?
Well, I have attended in the season that you, in 2011 or 2010, whichever it was, several, and I enjoyed it tremendously, and I'm very supportive of this. So I'm hoping that the rest of the council agrees with me.
Thank you. Councilmember Moeller?
I certainly read the positive comments in the report about the past Thursday night live event. My concern is that we just always really need to strive to keep the right balance between businesses and our neighborhoods. The problem is the location of this business is in the residential scaled commercial zone. If it was on the east side in a different area, I would certainly have a very different set of comments. I think that it's important that the residents retain the right to the quiet enjoyment of their properties. You get amplified music, noise, lighting, parking, and the usual list of public nuisances that come with alcohol consumption. We don't have any limits on how many people are going to be there. I know we're saying it's a local event, but go up to St. Helena. That's what they want people to do, and there is a tremendous amount of people. So I'm very. I just feel like I'm going to speak for the neighborhood. There are neighborhoods that are adjacent to this business, and these neighbors aren't just we heard there was only one complaint, but I know for certain that I heard a lot, and I usually try to encourage the neighbors, since the staff is gone, to call the police, because that's really how we're supposed to deal with that. But neighbors are very reluctant to become policemen and lodge complaints, and these neighbors just aren't a bunch of cranky people wringing their hands and not liking all the activity. They really want to, and they think they have a legal right to enjoy their property. So because of the location, I just don't support the additional 16 nights of that is being proposed here for the Thursday Night Live.
Okay. Councilmember Hall?
I want to just reiterate that I think the applicant has been open and communicative. I mean, I got that from the sense of the report, and again from the meeting today and the hearing today, and so I appreciate that. And I do have some concerns about sound and sound control, but we're also talking about 9 p.m. at night. And I know I go to bed at 7, unlike everyone else, but the reality is, we all have a little bit of noise. If I could only control my neighbors behind me and to the right and left of me, or if they could control my children, they'd probably be much happier. So the sound is an issue, but it's something that I think that we could probably mitigate, and I would hope that staff would do what they could to evaluate and control that. I do, after listening to Mayor Dunbar and his comments about the effect of food trucks and taco trucks or whatever truck is coming up, there will be obviously some effect on other businesses. I don't know what the level of that is, but I also don't I also don't see that people that are planning and making reservations at some of these higher end restaurants are necessarily are the people that will be stopping to have whatever food truck or purveyor is there at this event. And in fact, there is light fare that someone like me might be able to appreciate because it's less expensive and might be more, well, certainly myself and or other residents might be more appreciative of it because there's additional options. So I do see that as being, although a challenge for the businesses in town, being an additional benefit to the residents of this community. And I think, as it was brought to our attention from Ms. Saucerman about the attendance by these events of being really local people, and your comment that it'll be tennis shoes that'll be affecting the parking, I agree with that. And it's one thing to drive through Yountville at 4 p.m. in the afternoon and not be able to get out of Mulberry Street because there's so many people crossing the street. And yes, it's a form of difficulty whenever you're trying to do that, but at the same time, it's also very exciting to think that people come here and they want to spend time here, and extending that for 3 hours certainly is going to fill the pocketbooks, hopefully, of your organization and maybe many others, because they'll be coming here into town. Now we just need to figure out how to capture the sales revenue from the food trucks. That said, I feel like I could handle this. I don't know that 16 or 40 of the 36 of these events, as you corrected my math, within a 5 or 6 or 10 week period is necessarily what I would be promoting. But if you were to need a minimum of 8, I could feel comfortable with that. And I'm not sure what the maximum number needs to be. I guess I could lean on the 16 as long as I felt comfortable the other 20 small events weren't going to happen in the same 10 or 12 week period or whatever it happened to be, or 16 week period, I guess it would be. So that's my position.
Thank you. Vice Mayor, comments?
I guess we're lucky in Yountville to have the luxury of regulating someone's business to such a, outrageous degree, in my opinion. I don't know. As I listen to all the different things, I really kind of think that we're lucky to even say that, hey, you should be able to survive, but you got to check in with your local government to do all these different things. Now, that being said, I really think the reason we put in a lot of these special event requirements was when we started down this road 6 years ago or however long it was, the town didn't know, the council didn't know what the impact was going to be of tasting rooms, which were new to Yountville, having these kind of events. As you say, an event of 12 inside in a private tasting room. And I think that the answer is the impact has been almost non-existent. And from my perspective as a business person, but also as a council member, the more you can do, or any business can do, to bring in 12 people or 15 people that are going to have no real negative impact or outside impact, that's better for the town. It keeps businesses going. So I feel like these small ones, we're going to all of this degree of reporting and doing all of that. I think that we need to focus more on the larger events and not worry about it to such a degree on the small ones. My real question had to do is if we change the use permit for this, is this changing other ordinances that we have in place? And number one is the sound ordinance that we have. So if somebody's walking down the street or people are just sitting outside normally and they're making a big ruckus, and you can call the police and say, hey, it's so loud, or call the town, that can be stopped. It's no different with an event like this, whether it's amplified or not, that you have to stay within those requirements. So that's my perspective on the impact on neighbors, and everyone else is, hey, we've got a sound ordinance, which I think is pretty restrictive. Let's enforce that, and if that's enforced, then we should be in good shape. So I I think that is, that piece of it, to say we've got other ordinances in place that keep those things under control, and if people violate it, they violate it, and we come after you for that. I personally don't think that I have my own opinion about food trucks and how they impact businesses, but I don't think that the impact of a food truck on a special event, to me, is actually less than a caterer, because they're bringing in more people, they're setting up tents, they've got to have stuff running back and forth. So that's just my experience in the food businesses. I actually think it's less of an impact in general. I think it's fine to do a parking plan, especially if it's going to take up a space out front in a public parking space. But my perspective on that from being in the food business is that's not a negative at all. You talked about an 8-night minimum ability to do it. If we talk about this has 16, I think, is the maximum. That would be June, July, August, September, or maybe mid-June through mid-October. It kind of reminds me of Bob Hurley's barbecues. That it's got to be something that people just have a repetition and know enough that, hey, it's the summer, it's Thursday night, I bet there's something going on over at Summerston. Or Bob Hurley, it's Friday night, it's the summer, he's having a barbecue at 4 o'clock, let's go over there. Again, I don't want to get into that micromanagement of it. I think having that flexibility is necessary. You can't say, hey, this is going to work every time, and know ahead of time. Your real goal, my assumption is one, to be good with the community, but really it's a marketing event. And it actually reminds me of the Taste of Yountville. If I can do the Taste of Yountville and break even, that's great. I spend $1,000 on marketing to send out flyers to people. I have no idea whether I recovered that, but I see all these people and they come and they hear. So I think even if it breaks even, it's probably good for you. You may not think that, but I own my own business. I don't have a boss. So that's my perspective. So I agree with, in a long way to say, I agree with Councilmember Dorenbecker. I like it. Let's do it.
Thanks for your comments. What I'll say is I've definitely kind of evolved my position on this item as we've been sitting here tonight, because I had more, potentially stronger concerns about some of the elements that are being requested here. I still hold very near and dear the impacts on our restaurant community, and my concerns about having a mobile vendor come in does give me some pause about this request. But as I consider that, one, I don't see any member of the restaurant community here saying that they're concerned about the impact, and two, we are putting a maximum number of nights that impact may happen. I've heard numerous positive comments about the 2010 experience. My understanding is the one that the town officially received was not even from a resident in the immediate proximity of this. But I know for a fact that sound travels very clearly in great distance here in this town. I live on the east side of town. I could probably still hear faintly the live music. But more people say we miss that compadres Sunday evening live music, even though you could hear it across town, than say they wish we never had any live music around. I'm still moderately concerned about the mobile vendor impact. I worry about exactly where would it be located. Wherever it's located, you bring noise with that onto that part of the property. If it's in the back, then that's where your noise is going to be. If it's in the side vacant lot, that's better. If it's on the front on Washington Street, you start losing parking spaces. So I think that is still a critical component that needs to be worked out with staff. I'm not as concerned, nor do I think we are legally allowed to restrict to tasting portions anymore, thanks to the state regulation, if I understand it correctly, that full glasses and bottle service is part of the ability for tasting rooms. I see this as only 16 nights during the summer, having a positive community impact. If we hear of any negative community impacts, you risk losing your ability to do these. It's as simple as that. And I won't care if you've marketed 16 nights throughout the summer. If you violate it with noise, you violate it with 200 people that don't fit the space, whatever it is, we have, I think, restrictions in place here, and it's on the town to monitor that and to protect the interests of the residents. But I think this is within reason. I do remember hearing some strong public support for this. So I get the fact that you're trying to evolve your business. It's not necessarily the town's requirement to allow you to do whatever you think you need to do to make money, but we also don't want to create an artificial impediment to your success because we think something might be a problem. If we see it become a problem, then that's when we really need to act. So I think the requests are within reason. I would, like I said, definitely put it on staff to more diligently monitor the effects. Both, I would require, not only in this case, but all cases moving forward, enough of the voluntary. We'll tell you if we feel like it when you're going to have a special event. I think that, starting with this one, it sounds like, should be the regulation. There's no reason that the town should not be notified of a special event happening on a property that's going to have some level of impact. So I'm glad to see that that's already included in here. So with some reservation, but also some interest in seeing it succeed, I can support the application as it's been submitted. So,
Well, then I would like to make a motion that we approve the resolution number 3034-12, approving the master development plan amendment, including use permit amendment to add the Thursday Night Live Summer Outdoor Concert Music Series at Summerston Wine Tasting Room located at 6490 Washington Street, assessor parcel number 036-082-027.
Second?
there's been a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed?
Opposed, thank you. By a 4-to-1 vote, that passes. So congratulations, and look forward to you working with staff to make this a successful community addition. So thank you. Moving on, the rest of our audience, here for our next public hearing, Wayfinding Sign Program, a review of the draft ordinance and the Wayfinding Sign Program cost estimates.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I'm pitch hitting for Planning Director Bob Tiernan, and if I get stuck on something, Sandra's going to attempt to help me. Where we're at tonight really is to bring to the council's attention two substantive details, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time because the first part is an ordinance that we thought, because this is a unique program, and we wanted some clarification that the program was supported by the council, and it's, with our sign ordinance. So staff has put together basically an enabling ordinance that says, yes, this is a town-endorsed program, and with your support, we're looking for feedback on that draft ordinance. Our intention would be to notice it and have the public hearing at the next council meeting. The second component was that the council asked for input on the subscription cost and a better understanding of what the program would be. What we've attempted to outline...
Steve, I want to interrupt you right now because I see that there's confusion here. You have this listed under public hearings, and this is not listed as a public hearing in the report. So I want to make that clarification before we continue.
The aspect is, it's really a public comment, public hearing issue. It's not a technical, because we have to bring the ordinance back. The ordinance has not been introduced.
But I want to make that clear that this is not going to be a public hearing on this item tonight.
That is correct.
This is a conversation about a future public hearing.
There's a component related to the fee structure to make sure that you're comfortable with the direction in that, and that's what initially led this to be categorized as a public hearing. But you're correct. What we're asking for is feedback and going forward. The other component that it's been challenging to do without understanding the cost is to actually solicit the business support. So bear with me, and I'll try and I can't quite answer why Bob was fixated on it being a public hearing, but the actions that you're taking tonight are not necessary from a public hearing perspective.
So just to try to be perfectly clear on that, it looks like the last sentence of the report, the expectation for the opening of a public hearing on this item would be July 17.
That's correct, because again, the ordinance would require a public hearing, and that's the draft. So it may be that when I think that the bottom line is it didn't meet the noticing requirements, so that's why it won't go forward as.
I just want to make it perfectly clear to anybody that might be listening, if they were listening because they thought this was the hearing, that July 17th, as far as we know, is a date certain right now for the
Correct.
hearing. Okay, thank you.
But what I would like to do is, you've seen this on several occasions with regards to the.
I think that had an impact on our public audience, so I'm glad that we had that clarification.
I'm not, because actually I think in some cases their participation in the dialogue about where we're going would have been helpful.
Fair enough.
Because we do have an idea about cost, and that's been what's driving this, was to get it in the information related to it. Tonight, what we're really looking at is an understanding, one, is the council comfortable moving forward with the program? If so, we'll bring back the draft ordinance. The ordinance is an implementation mechanism with which to do it. Secondly, as the council had asked for an understanding about the potential cost impact. And you'll see in the attachment 3, that there are approximately $15,000 in upfront costs related to the program that the town will need to advance or cover, some of which will be recovered on the renewal, some of which are town-related because the idea of here's where you're at map will be covered by the town. What's in yellow is an individual sign cost for the participant. So you'll see it's a blended system. It is a subscription system, as you asked. The initial individual sign is in the $280 range, and that's identified as the actual cost from the sign production to, and then there's one application fee. That application fee allows for the town to review, and that will be regardless of the number of signs. So if a participant has multiple signs, there's only one $50 application fee. With that, I'm happy to try to answer questions that you may have about the program or feedback.
Okay, Councilmember Mueller?
The only thing I didn't really understand is that the initial cost of the town was $15,000, and that's going to be paid back over time. But I don't really see any math that shows me how it's going to be paid back over time.
Actually, if you go.
Where's that?
Oh, I'm sorry. What that is it's recovered by the $25. In this chart, there's a $25 renewal fee for subsequent years.
It's the renewal fee.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so any projections? Anybody just kind
That
of do
one-
some guessing how long it's going to take to pay down $15,000?
We actually are anticipating about a 4-year term,
Okay.
and that's not a firm projection because I don't have an accurate count, which was why I was hopeful that we spent a lot of effort to try to get the merchant community here so that we could gauge interest, because there's a high fixed cost, and then I think, but this does seem to be very consistent with what the merchant community has identified, and that's why I wanted to break down so that the council sees what the individual subscriber cost is, and then that renewal fee and that one-time application fee. And a reminder for everybody that our wayfinding sign program is very different than the adjacent communities, and based on ZDRB input, business community input, and the council's input, we're talking about a post structure that's pedestrian scale and in the 5-foot range with signs in this kind of a range, no logos, one a business name, and then a subset, so that if it was, Hurley's, it might say bar and restaurant in smaller letters underneath it. And the focus is to identify going north and south so that we connect the business community, and that we also allow the opportunity for businesses inside, for example, V Marketplace, Plaza Corsia, Edward James Courtyard, where only a handful are really visible from the street, that there's a clearer way for the public to know that there's stuff inside. So that's our purpose. What we'd really like to do is, with your support, get this information out, start doing some solicitation of the businesses, and then we will bring back the ordinance for formal adoption, but the ordinance is a technicality that basically says this is a town indoor sign program, and your feedback on the pricing is also appropriate.
Other questions?
Yeah, just one more. I've never really understood why the businesses don't want to put a logo on their sign. Is that their preference?
Actually, it came out of the focus stakeholder. The concern was what's appropriate for the Yountville aesthetic. And the business community had some discussions, and they thought in this particular case, simpler was better, because when you started getting into logos, then you started getting into colors. This is also going to be a very simplistic black porcelain with white lettering, kind of a French country feel with a wood and metal post structure. So that came out of their focus group, and is driving some of the costs, because there are cheaper sign material and mechanisms, but this is what they were interested in.
Okay, thanks.
And just to add on, because I've attended a couple of these meetings also, that was a fairly unanimous position, that there was very little interest or no interest really in everybody put up their own logo, their colors to identify their own brand. Then that was where the visual graffiti concern was really popping up. So I think people were pretty unanimous in their interest to keep it clean, elegant, and kind of what they considered appropriate. So, questions, Councilmember Hall?
Yeah, I just have two questions. First of all, the initial cost, $14,500, is what I've read, something in that range. Is that budgeted?
No, at this point it's not, because
So
you
new.
haven't. So the good news is in the budget, we actually have a unassigned fund balance, so this could be a mid-year budget adjustment put in. And again, that's why I want to make sure that it's something, we hadn't been
It's
able
not-
to get numbers to this point.
Right, I was going to say, there's no placeholder for it or anything like that, because I couldn't recall it. So I was confirming that. Secondly, what percentage, and I'm going to use that number because I don't want anyone to try to cough up the actual number, what percentage of the businesses in town have expressed interest in participating? Is it
Well,
more than
let me-
50%?
It's hard to identify that way. What I will tell you is, two of the very disappointed people that left that aren't listening to this conversation, V Marketplace has been very active and very interested, and the 22 businesses in North Yountville that don't feel they're getting their share of the visitors are very interested in this program.
So the answer is it's less than 50%? You
We
don't-
haven't done that
okay,
way, and we
I
haven't done, I would say it is over 50%.
Okay.
And that's, the proof will be, the next round will be sending a letter out with here's what your per sign cost is going to be. Are you interested, in what locations would you like? And that's what the folks at home and the business community will be hearing based on the feedback. We'll start that process yet this week.
So then, let me rephrase my question of staff a different way. So if, let's say, not as many parties are interested at the time we decide we're going to undertake this investment to put these posts up for the benefit of less than half of the businesses in town, is our cost still, whatever the number is on the sheet, $14,500? Or is it higher because there's a fixed cost issue that we can't recover?
No, that fixed cost, really, just to be real clear, that fixed cost is the 13 posts, the installation of those posts, and the map that goes on each one of those. Those are the fixed costs, because the business community is paying the variable cost, which is their individual sign.
Okay, that's what I wanted to understand. Thank you.
Councilmember Dornbecker.
Yes, my question is, how much of this $14,654 will be paid back to the town?
I would anticipate the vast majority over time, because the renewal,
But only the renewal will be,
well, the council has a choice. If you want this to be 100% covered by the business community, then we just simply distribute that $14,000 cost over all the individual signs. And that becomes, I think, a little prohibitive. So that's why we looked at trying to recover that on the renewal basis.
thank you.
Vice Mayor.
I'm sorry, how many signs are there again?
There are 13
I thought you
posts.
said 8, so. I can just make a comment. My bigger concern is how we're going to how we're going to allocate out who gets which post, because I mean,
Actually, your policy, the draft ordinance, it's in there.
I know it's in there, but I'm saying, my point is, I think that those will not be an issue at all to fill those things up. That's
We're
my personal.
we're led to believe that.
That's my personal opinion. Nobody's asked me if I'm going to do it, but I'm going to tell you I am. The question I have has to do with the annual subscription renewal. So the upfront cost to a business is $250, let's say just to make it easy, per sign. So let's say they were going to do 4 of them, they're going to spend $1,000 up front, right?
That's not the way I read it.
Well, it's 281 plus 256 for each additional placard that they do, right? So I'm just saying 250 because it's a nice round number. So $1,000. And then after that, you only pay $100 a year for how long?
Well, because what we're looking at, remember, they're paying for the actual production of their individual sign.
Yeah. But I guess
So-
my question is, when somebody backs their Ram truck and knocks over one of these signs, we, being the town of Yountville, is going to pay for that new sign, right?
Actually, no, we actually have a requirement in the program to participate. They're responsible. So the sign gets damaged or broke, they pay for the replacement, the business owner.
Okay, well, what about the post?
Well, that comes in under ours.
Okay. I guess my concern is that, just knowing the restrictions on signs and I think what the value of this could be to businesses is that, to me, $25 sounds low.
If your
I know you're
feedback is
surprised to hear me say that,
if
but
the
that's what I
feedback is
think.
you'd like that to be higher, that's why we're here.
Just saying.
What we were trying to look at is, remember, we're trying to recover the approximately 15,000
Right.
because they're already, so this was a hard one for me, trying to figure out, especially when I don't have real metrics to know how many people, because each sign can accommodate potentially 22, 11 on each side. So, for example, a sign in front of V Marketplace might have 44 11 times 2, 44 times 25 on one post.
No, not on one.
No.
No,
Oh, you do it on both sides.
No, hear me out, because the post can support 11 coming off each way. And each sign is a front and back, because you're going north-south. So in that particular case, if you have it, you have potential for 44. Now, that's a maximum sign. Most are going to be far less than that.
There's 7 posts.
There are 13 posts. But for example, some of the posts we're only going to probably have 6 to 8 signs just because of that. But you're right, we don't have that. That's the metric that we're lacking right now because we haven't been able to identify how many people are going. For example, there are more posts going from central Yountville to link people to Noyo because that's the longest distance. So what we don't know is, that person that's up in Washington Square may need to buy 5 in order to draw the person all the way from the central point.
4, since they can only buy 4.
But anyway.
No,
Yeah.
I think clarification is needed here. The sign is one side. You're not buying both sides of the sign.
The business is buying
Correct, it's one
placard.
sign.
One side of one blade.
Yes.
It's not both sides.
Now, in
So-
some locations, they may be the same front and back, but that's only going to be when you're right in front of the
But they're
business
paying twice
proximity.
then.
They're still paying
That's
twice.
2 of
It's
their
only on one
allocation.
side. That is correct.
So that's the clarification I was looking for, and Councilmember Hall was nice enough to do the numbers that at maximum, we could conceivably recover this cost in just over a year to a year and a half, maximum of total registration renewal. That's probably a little bit aggressive to consider that.
But it would be
that's the
high.
reality
You're
of it.
assuming 22 per post?
So you do
44.
two sides, 11 signs per side, 2 sides on each, times 13 posts. 572 times 25 is 14,300.
But there's got to be administrative costs with that renewal that we're probably not calculating in right now, so.
But that
there's
does
gotta be-
that gives a ballpark on how long, it's not necessarily a 10-year cost recovery, which is a concern that I had, that, yes, there are going to be additional costs, and as the Vice Mayor mentioned or brought up, if somebody runs over the post, the town is on the hook for the post, the business subscriber is on the hook for the sign replacement.
And we're
That's still
also, yeah.
unbudgeted cost.
There is a $50 one-time admin fee for us because, for example, the language is all the same. So we're trying to be fair in establishing a guideline for this, realizing that, it is something that the business community, we think we can support, and I think most of our efforts going to be upfront and one time. We're also somewhat fortunate in the sense that our business community is relatively stable, so we're not talking about, 30% churn every year with turnover. So, but again, I wanted to make sure, because you'd asked us to try a couple different models, and this is really a hybrid on trying to make sure that the private sector is covering the significant cost of the program.
I'm going to invite our member of the public that's here tonight, if you'd like to comment at all on this at this time, and if not, what I'd like to recommend, since we're not making a final decision, and it's critical that we get the business community to let us know, are they going to invest in this program, is that if there are specifics, the Vice Mayor has mentioned he's interested in potentially seeing an increase in that $25 resubscriber fee.
I agree with that.
I agree with that.
Interested in that conversation.
Okay.
Is that accurate to what you said?
It was, but I'm going to revise it.
But, so, before you revise it,
Yeah.
there is some interest from the council to see that number change, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Correct.
Generally speaking, the council is supportive of this idea, at least moving forward, for a, put up or go away to the wayfinding program with the business community. Is that a fair statement, that we
Yeah.
agree to move forward with this item?
Yes.
Okay, so is there interest in tweaking, it sounds like at least two members now, if not three, council members believe that renewal fee structure is too low?
I believe it's too low.
Can I make a comment about my comments?
Yes.
Well, can I make another comment?
No, the Vice Mayor, and then Councilmember Mueller can.
So I think, thanks to Councilmember Hall's math, my biggest concern was if the town is in a situation where it's putting up $15,000 and not recovering that for 4 years. To me, 4 years is an extraordinarily long recovery time. I don't think it's going to be that long, and I think your math is good. I mean, it's not going to be 15,000 in the first year, but maybe it's going to be 10. That I'm not as worried then that fee has to cover some of these installation costs. Now, that being said, I think that having something like, I guess one of the questions would be is can the council in the future come back and say, you know what, we probably should make that $40 and not $25 or whatever it would be based on cost. I assume this is not a use permit, so we could do that.
Well, let me remind everybody, one of your items coming up next is your master fee schedule.
Councilmember Mueller?
I think we just really don't know how, all this is really going to play out yet. So I think the most important thing for me is that we try to, we're going to go back to the community, but we really need critical mass to know whether we're going to move ahead with this. I think we are, but, that would be my direction to staff, is figure out a way that you can reach out to everybody and say, they don't have to send in a check, but are you going to do this? About how many are you going to sign up for? Because that would be important to me to know that you're going to, sell the vast majority of these things right out of the gate.
And I think
Definitely agree with you, but the feedback we're getting from the business community
very
is
inconsistent.
tell us what it is going to cost.
Yeah.
So if I can't tell them what it's going to cost, they're not going to tell me what their interest is. Or they'll say yes, and then we'll come around and tell them, and they go, oh, I didn't know it was that much. So
I'm gonna get back to my comment of, I hear direction to proceed.
Mm-hmm.
I hear direction to evaluate what the business interest is, and if that resubscription amount can be raised without losing potential business, there is some level of interest from the council to review that. Otherwise, I think as presented, there is some acceptance. Is that generally accurate?
Yes.
And Councilmember Dornbecker, your comment?
My comment is that raising that annual subscription renewal will possibly help to cover costs down the road too for the town, for the posts that we're going to be responsible for. So, anyway, I like the idea.
Okay, so I think, is that enough direction that you can go with? Yes, Vice Mayor.
The question on, when we're talking about proceeding, this is the way I view this, because when we talk about July 17th, make a decision of whether you guys think you should present to us this $25 or $35, whatever it is for a resubscription fee, right? Fine. Let's do it. Let's pass it. Go out to the business community and say, starting on August 1st, or you don't have to be that fast, but August 15th, we are going to have a subscription period, August 15th to September 15th. Please bring it in. We're not going to spend any money until, I think it should be until people put in a check.
Actually, what I
Because
want...
you don't have to spend this money if you don't have to put up a sign if nobody actually bids for the sign.
We anticipate, based on the feedback, staff actually wants to send a letter of interest to everybody asking what their interest, showing the costs that are outlined in Attachment 3. So I'm probably going to use this opportunity to say that the annual renewal in year 2 will be between 25 and 35. So that gives us a range, and that's not probably a deal point killer for them. My biggest concern is that upfront cost, because somebody looking at 4 or more signs, potentially that's $1,000. And our conversation with most people is that they believe that that's appropriate and they're willing to make that investment.
So I think there's clear direction at this point on moving forward with that. So with that, can we move on to item B of this, or B2, I guess? We've done everything you need of us for now on the wayfinding sign program. And I'll just speak to the business community. They need to come forward, and this is to benefit our business community primarily. Yes, some of the residents are going to benefit, but this is to help them out. We're trying to help them out, but if they aren't willing to partner with us on this, then that's going to be a problem. So strongly encourage their participation in the next couple weeks. Okay. That said, since we're saying stuff all night, master fee schedule, are we moving on to that?
Yes.
Kathleen, you're up.
Yes. So presented to you this evening for adoption is the town's final proposed master fee schedule for fiscal year 2012-13. The schedule was initially presented to the council as a draft at our budget workshop on May 23rd. Based on council review and feedback, a few additional changes were made to the schedule that is presented to you this evening. Attached to the staff report is a copy of the master fee schedule, along with a schedule showing the summary of proposed changes, which was included as an attachment to the town's public notice. In the area of parks and recreation, many fees have been increased per council policy to increase our cost recovery targets for certain programs. A few new fees have been added for new programs and services, such as projector rental at the Community Hall Community Center, bocce court lights, program fees for the newly restructured after-school program, parking space for filming or special event, annual parking management fee, which may be included as part of a conditional use permit. Other fees, as noted with the highlighted changes, were adjusted by a CPI of 2.2%. Staff is proposing a change in the timing for future updates of the master fee schedule. It was originally thought that the updates would take place during the same time frame as development and approval of the budget. But in working through this first annual update, staff realized that the review and approval of the master fee schedule should be a precursor to the budget. And if a council approves this change, staff will be bringing the schedule for review in early March in future years. And what this would allow is it would allow our Parks and Recreation summer programs to be evaluated and updated prior to the department publishing their summer program brochure and advertising online what their fees and charges will be. So we're recommending implementation date of May 1st for only the Yountville Community Pool and Summer Camp programs in future years. But staff would still have the rest of the schedule take effect July 1. And we would use, instead of an April CPI factor, we would refer to a December CPI factor in future years. So in conclusion, I'm available to answer any questions that you may have about the proposed master fee schedule, and we are asking that you conduct a public hearing and adopt the resolution.
Thank you. And I just want to point out, for the interest of the public, the one line that I think is important for everyone to remember top of page 2, in accordance with California state law, the town is not able to make an overall profit on the fees and charges collected. However, the town is able to fully recover the costs incurred to deliver this service. So that's just kind of a foundation of the structure that we're going to be discussing. So, thank you. Are there any questions about the staff report? Councilmember Hall.
Yes, thank you. Kathleen, I just have a general question about, in your highlighted section under attachment 3, I want to make sure I understand. So we charge a $100 deposit for certain activities like renting the bocce courts, at which we only charge $11 per hour for 2 hours. So we take $100 and then reimburse $78. Is that correct? After they've used it for 2? Could someone? I just want to make sure because
No, the deposit's a security deposit, more like making sure that the park's not damaged, they left garbage and stuff like that.
So it's purely a deposit to secure the space and to ensure that it wasn't damaged or destroyed, and then it's refunded afterwards. So is the payment made in advance of that
Yes.
deposit being returned? Okay,
Yes. So it's a damage deposit.
that's
is
all
what
it's
it is.
really. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Roller, any questions?
I have-
Councilmember Dornbecker?
Yes, please. I've noticed on page 2 of the schedule under bocce court lights, it's in blue and it's $40 for 2 hours. To whom is that charged and how is that charged? I mean,
That is only charged on a private party rental when they rent it during the evening hours.
and that's whether it's a resident or a non-resident?
Correct.
And I can see that, you know, we always do try to recover our costs. So vis-à-vis the wayfinding sign program, I think that, you know, that's consistent with this. Thank you.
Vice Mayor, any questions? I don't have any either. Any questions from the public? Seeing none, we'll move back, we'll close the public hearing portion of this item and
I will-
bring back for potential action by the council.
I would like to make a motion that we approve resolution number 3035-12, adopting the master fee schedule, including reaffirming existing fees, adjusting current fees, and adding new fees for fiscal year 2012-2013.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kathleen, for that report and creating a very efficient schedule. Okay, we're going to move on to our first administrative item. The item everyone's been staying here waiting for. Adoption of 2012-13 operating budget. Continue, please, Kathleen.
Yes. So presented to you this evening for adoption is the town's final proposed 2012-13 operating budget, the appropriations limit for 2012-13, and the town's fiscal policies. The town's operating budget has been discussed and reviewed during 2 regular council meetings and 2 budget workshops held during special meetings. All meetings were open to the public, and those who participated were given an opportunity to hear presentations from staff, feedback and direction from the council, as well as participate in the process, as was the case when a group of interested citizens came and spoke to the council regarding the Yountville trolley. The final proposed budget is a complete document with an entire front section prelude to the department-level narratives and line item details. The introduction includes the town manager's budget transmittal message and a community profile. The section following provides a comprehensive budget overview comprised of the following sections: town council vision, town mission statements and strategic goals, our budget summaries, parameters, and assumptions, organizational and personnel information, budget adoption resolution and town fiscal policies, and our budget definitions. Other changes to the final proposed budget include those that were discussed at the budget workshops. We updated the fire and emergency services budget to reflect cost of final approved contract with Napa County. We updated the housing opportunity program budget to correct the amount budgeted for contract services. We updated the parks and recreation budgets to reflect the change in the after-school program and to account for the teen program activities as part of both the after-school program and camp programs. And program revenue budgets were also updated to reflect that change. And other minor changes were made throughout the document as a result of a final and thorough review by the Finance Department. Highlights of the budget include projected TOT revenue of $4.8 million and sales tax of $915,000. Funding maintained for all current services and staffing levels. We have project funding for the second phase of our town's electronic document management system. And we've also included funding for implementation of a paperless agenda process. The general fund budget is balanced and includes reserves funded at levels established by town council policy, including our general fund emergency reserve at 20% of operating expenses, funded at $1.26 million. We've got a revenue stabilization reserve at 10% of our annual TOT revenue, or $480,000. We also have a reserve for claims of $50,000, a reserve for contingencies of $150,000, and a reserve for legal contingencies of $250,000. Also included in the general fund budget is a $675,000 transfer to our capital projects fund and a $668,650 transfer for debt service. A few other significant items to note include the town's capital projects fund budget, which includes 20 projects totaling $1.17 million. The budget does not include the seismic retrofit for Town Hall, which will be evaluated for financing over the next several months. The water and wastewater utility enterprise funds include the second full year of the new rate schedules and progress toward elimination of the operating deficits. The town's recycled water expansion project is included in the wastewater capital projects budget, and staff is working to secure a low-cost financing option to enable the project to continue moving forward in the timeline required by the State Regional Water Quality Control Board. Staff has included a combined revenue and expenditure overview by fund as an attachment to the staff report to summarize the budget as it is presented for adoption. The resolution adopting the budget also includes approval of the town's appropriation limit for 2012-13. The calculation in the appropriations limit summary shows the town's budgeted appropriations subject to the limit are $85,450 over the legal limit before the voter-approved override and $814,550 under the limit with the $900,000 voter-approved override. The final element of the resolution includes approval of the town's fiscal policies. No new policies have been included during the budget development process, so this action is reaffirming the existing policies as listed. If the council adopts new policies or amends policies during the fiscal year, staff will include them with next year's budget so that all fiscal policies can be easily referenced in one location. That concludes my presentation, and I'm prepared to answer any questions the council may have.
Great. Questions? Councilmember Dornbecker.
Yes, please. Kathleen, I am not a bean counter.
Okay.
Excuse me, pardon that. I didn't, with no aspersions. But I'm looking at the combined revenue and expenditure overview, attachment 2, and it concerns me that the total revenue does not exceed the total expenditures by $1,666,288. And then I understand that there's interfund transfers and depreciable capital projects, which brings it down. But it still looks to me as though there's a variance of $358,788. What does that mean, please?
Well, it's a little bit misleading to combine them in total like that, because you do have the water and the wastewater enterprise, which are really more on accrual basis, and you have your general fund and your capital projects fund, gas tax, debt service, which are not. However, you kind of have to look at each fund individually, and it's, I would say, not anything to be alarmed about.
I think the question has to do with, it looks like
The total.
we're in a deficit.
That's what it looks like to me.
So if you could explain to Councilmember Dornbecker the question, show us that we're not in a deficit if we're not. Is that accurate?
Well, we do have some deficits in our water utility enterprise and wastewater utility enterprise. But we're certainly not in a deficit in our general fund, our capital projects fund, our gas tax fund, or our debt service fund.
So despite the fact that we show a deficit, the budget is balanced.
With the exception of the water enterprise and wastewater enterprise
So-
funds,
okay,
yes.
that's what-
Right,
that's what
what's
the
causing
variance
it,
is.
Yes.
right.
Okay, thank you.
When the rates finish going up at the end of year 5 with
Okay, I
assumption
got
of no other problems, we should see a nice theoretical zero there.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there other questions about the report or comments about it?
I have comments.
Let's go to comments.
Yeah,
Councilmember Hall.
First of all, Kathleen, great job. This is a lot of work. Pulling together budgets is an exercise. I'm glad to see that the numbers I went and just quickly ticked and tied looked magnificent. So thank you for that. I did also want to say I trust that this is the next or the second year of Springbrook. Is that right?
Yes.
So hopefully this whole process is getting cleaner, easier. You're getting more accountability from individual department heads and their ability to support and manage their budgets. And so, I think it's a job well done. I also want to say that I'm glad the town can get to a structural positive balance, even though it's just barely greater than zero at $56,000 in the general fund. But the good news is that we've taken the time to go back and review and analyze where our costs lie, and then hopefully as we look forward, we will receive or collect all of the revenues that we're anticipating. So, but I think we feel like it's a relatively conservative budget, and I just wanted to commend you and the team for all the effort, because I know what an exercise it can be.
Councilmember Moeller?
I'd like to reiterate those comments and something to maybe chew on for next year, once, with all your new software and with the TOT flattening out. I'd like to have some discussions at some time about having a multi-year budget and just, see where we go with that.
Thank you. Councilor Dornbecker, any additional comments?
No, just thank you very much, Kathleen, and, it all looks Greek to me.
Don't say Greek when we're talking about the budget.
Oh, I take that back.
German.
Vice Mayor.
German.
I will also say thank you, Kathleen, all the department heads that are obviously here, town manager, everybody. There's a tremendous amount of work that goes into this. And the great thing about the budget process, even if it's foreign at times, is it makes you go through all of your operations and everything and kind of reassess every year. I want to point out two things. First of all, I'll say my only qualification, which I won't dwell on, is obviously I'm still not happy about our OPEB reserves, but a good reserve that I want to point out is when I look at the general fund summary in the final report, I feel like it's very it's page 114 of the budget document. I did open it up, Kathleen. It shows that the capital project funds were funded 2 years ago, 2010-11 and 2011-12. And the only reason that it shows those balances is because we had excess funds at the end of the year. At this point, when we were finishing our budget, it's misleading because we didn't have those transfers in there. And what's great is this year we've got even more, $675,000 in there. The reason I want to highlight that is we have seen, despite the economic times, remarkable revenue growth in Yountville, and I think it's very worthwhile pointing out that this council and our staff, we've put over $500,000 of that change back into our capital reserves for capital projects of keeping the streets and roads and our parks, et cetera. And hopefully, if we're fortunate again, because I do believe we have conservatively estimated our revenues on at least TOT, that maybe that number can go up even a little more. But it's great to have that number at the beginning of the fiscal year and not at the end of the fiscal year. So, good job, thank you.
The only point I want to make, other than sharing my appreciation and congratulations on yet another impressive presentation and layout, the numbers are the numbers. They make any budget look good when you can have this many positive numbers. But the transparency, the clarity, and the thoroughness of that is what's commendable. I also appreciate, as the council has given direction, that we are more accurate with our numbers. I really like, but I also don't want to have $1 million, unfunded balance at the end. It was a great problem to have, but I feel much more comfortable being more on target without being overly aggressive. So I like that philosophy that we're now following, and I would encourage that we continue. And I think that this council and the staff have been very responsive to any glitches or changes that we have to address mid-year. So that's what gives me that extra comfort while we're adding to our balances and being able to put some reserves away, that we're still responsive where we can be throughout the year. So if we have other opportunities, we can act on them and not just wait for 12 months. So with all those comments, is there a motion to adopt the budget?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 3036-12, adopting the 2012-13 operating budget, approving appropriations GAN limit for fiscal year 2012-13, and reaffirming existing fiscal policies, general finance policy, town investment policy, use of long-term debt policy, OPEB funding policy, OPEB trust investment policy, fund balance policy, utility enterprise rate policy, use of drought water reserve policy.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for unanimous adoption of the budget. And just, again, thank you to council and to staff. All the heavy lifting has been done over the last several months. It makes it look like this is a real easy process, but we went through 43 workshops to get to this point, so this is just really the final critical step, but final step. So thanks to everybody that helped us get to this point. Moving on to the sign ordinance workshop. Who's going to run this one? Sandra.
This is the second workshop of two that were presented on the sign ordinance update. The first went before the ZDRB on May 8th, and their recommendations are included in the staff report. Tonight, we're presenting it to you for your feedback, and the idea is we'll incorporate that feedback into a draft ordinance that comes back before you at a future meeting. The ideas in the staff report can be generally grouped into two broad categories. One is on portable signs, and the other is how to calculate sign area. With regards to portable signs, the sign ordinance has a blanket prohibition on all portable signs, and the reasons behind that restriction are to keep sidewalks and the right-of-way clear of obstructions, to limit the amount of clutter, and also to maintain the town's restrained sign aesthetic. And so the question before you is whether we should revisit this prohibition and allow some or all portable signs, and if we do, whether we should create standards for their design, content, and placement. And the first category I'll talk about are A-frame signs, and it's probably the category deserving the greatest amount of attention because it's the type of sign that business owners put out before they're told that they can't use them, and they're the ones that they continue to express a desire to be able to use. And A-frames are not intended to replace permanent signage. They really serve a different purpose, and when they've been used in town, they've been used to for messages that change from day to day. It may be listing daily specials, or listing the goods sold, or counting down the days to a special event. And it's the blackboard sign that really has emerged recently in town. And staff does note the high quality of A-frames we've seen in town, but the sheer quantity of A-frames that may be used if all businesses wanted to use them could have a significant impact on the town aesthetic and the downtown commercial corridor. And that's even if these are well-designed and appropriately placed. So I do need to mention that there are some A-frames that have been allowed for different reasons, even though they're not allowed by the sign ordinance, and it's really an interpretation of staff. The first category would be A-frames that are not visible from the right-of-way, and that's because these signs aren't within the purview of the sign ordinance. An example would be the coffee caboose sign, and that's because the business is set back from the right-of-way, and the A-frame itself is not oriented to the street. You may, however, catch glimpses of it when you're on the street. Another category are signs that are not placed on the exterior of a business, and Kelly's Fuel is an example. They have placed an A-frame inside the building, but when their garage doors are up, you can definitely see it. And the other category are temporary signs. And Bouchon used a temporary sign to announce the reopening after the fire, but there are also nonprofits and special events that use them, and Arts in April comes to mind. And while you're allowed to use temporary signs and to announce special events, A-frames still fall within that category of prohibited sign. So when we took this issue to the ZDRB, the consensus was we should continue to prohibit A-frame signs. And there was one member of the public that was present at that meeting, and he shared this opinion. And his idea was that they're not necessary and that it actually breeds greater use of A-frames because of the competition issue amongst businesses. So the question is whether we should continue this outright ban across the board, whether we should permit some of the exceptions I mentioned, the three I noted, or whether, taken a step further, we start lifting this prohibition and allow businesses to use these. And in the staff report, I've introduced an idea of an administrative approval process that could apply to A-frames or to all portable signs. And it would be an application, process and fee, and staff approval of the location, the hours of use, the design and copy of these signs. And it would be subject to an annual use monitoring fee. And that's due to the fact that it would require heavy enforcement, that A-frames tend to move inch closer to the street, so staff would need to be involved. So even with town review authority over A-frames, there is still a concern about clutter and then about the placement of the signs. Another category of potential portable signs are open signs. The sign ordinance permits open and closed signs, and these can be 1 square foot with an aggregate total of 4 square feet. And what we've seen in town over the years is that a lot of businesses use portable open signs that are placed right directly adjacent to their business entries. So this discussion presents an opportunity to legalize these signs and come up with some standards for them, or to make it explicit that they're not allowed. But other than the portable sign issue of open signs is the content of open signs. And the definition permits business hours to be listed, emergency phone numbers and credit cards accepted. And the question is whether that's really necessary or not. And staff tends to think it isn't, and the ZDRB shared that opinion. So we can change the definition, if you'd like, so that it's open or closed only. The next category of potential portable signs are menu signs, and the sign ordinance has prescriptive standards on the use of these signs. They're only permitted on the exterior wall of a business or in an interior window. A maximum allowed size of a little over 8 square feet is permitted, and that's really, quite frankly, huge. And the size of menu signs is included in the total permitted sign area. So regarding the portable sign, as with the open signs, there are businesses that use them. Bistro Gentil is an example, and the question is whether we should allow these or not. Regarding the area, the maximum size permitted is far greater than 8.5 by 11 used by area restaurants. And so maybe there's a chance to bring the standard more in line with the actual practice. And if we do that, the question becomes whether the menu itself really should be counted toward a site signage. The consensus of the ZDRB was that there should be more latitude with the placement of signs and that we should abbreviate some of these standards. So once again, the consensus of the ZDRB was to ban A-frames, but to allow other portable signs if there are very clear standards on the hours, use, placement, and content. But then if they're permitted, we must consider how many portable signs would be permitted per business. And Chair Janes of the ZDRB suggested 1, and I think that's a good standard. We wouldn't want an open sign, a menu sign, and an A-frame all cluttering the sidewalk in front of one business. And then there's the issue of how to treat multiple occupancy properties, especially those that have interior courtyards, and not all businesses have street frontage. And Chair Janes suggested in this case perhaps 1 or 2 maximum per property, depending on the amount of frontage. What this does is lead to competition amongst the businesses, and it really illustrates what can be a difficult standard, and raises the threat of portable signs that they'll just simply lead to clutter. So that's the first issue that we want you to discuss in detail. The next is sign area, and we're proposing a new definition that addresses all the different mounting options and clears some of the ambiguity of the current definition. And so we've included how to measure a wall-mounted sign, and addresses how to measure a sign with a border and those that are letters only. We've provided how to measure a freestanding sign, and the same concept applies when the structure serves some purpose other than a sign, but would count the entire structure for a structure that serves no other purpose. And examples would be the retaining landscape wall at Napa Valley Lodge, upon which a sign is placed, versus, let's say, Hotel Yountville, where that's clearly a monument sign. We're also suggesting that we count both sides of a double-sided sign, since that's not clear in the current ordinance. But even with this new definition, there's some areas that deserve more discussion, and one is regarding sign content. The sign ordinance limits business signage to business identification only, and that's the business name. Advertising signs, which advertise goods sold or services offered, are not allowed, except for master sign plan properties, which house one or more businesses. But even then, it's qualified that those businesses can only list goods and services if necessary, and that's was a question that we took to the ZDRB, whether we should clarify when necessary. The consensus was that no, we don't need to do that, because all signs are approved through the discretionary review process, and they could be approved or denied. Some examples are Redwood has a pizzeria sign, Summerston has wine, art, and ranching, and many tasting rooms clarify that they're a tasting room. The second issue would be whether we should apply sort of this advertising standard for descriptive terms to all businesses and not just limit it to master sign plan properties. And the ZDRB felt that that was a more fair and equal treatment of the sign code. Regarding total permitted sign area, the sign code calculates signage at 1/2 square foot of signage for each lineal foot of building frontage. No sign can exceed 25 square feet, and it's generally limited to 1 sign per elevation. And certain signs are exempt. I mentioned the open signs, the signs that aren't visible from the right-of-way. But with that, I indicated that there is a staff interpretation of how to apply this standard based on whether they're visible, how far they're located from the right-of-way, which direction they're oriented. So Chair Janes suggested a significant deviation on how to measure sign area, and he suggests increasing the total amount of signage per business, eliminating all of these restrictions, and allowing a business to determine how to allocate their signs between business identification, advertising, open, menu signs, whatnot, believing they're the ones in the best position to know how to sign the business. And believing that all the complex rules in the sign ordinance, he used the term boiling the ocean, doesn't lead to the desired end result of, restrained signage, size, design, and numbers. So with that concept out there, all other members of the ZDRB felt that the sign ordinance was working fine and that it didn't need this kind of drastic revision. And, staff tends to agree, but we raise Chair Janes' idea for your consideration. The last item I'm going to discuss are development signs, and those are signs that name a complex or list all of the tenants or goods and services within that business. So the broader question is whether we should allow development signs that only list the complex name and that don't offer any suggestion as to businesses or goods and sold, because it's questionable whether this achieves a sign purpose of directing customers to the the location, and especially when seen through the eyes of a first-time visitor to town. Using Washington Square as an example, you don't know if it has office, retail, or restaurants because it's just a complex sign. So then the question becomes, should they be required to list all of the tenants? But if we take that route, we're forcing the complex and the businesses, we're forcing them to list their signs in a certain manner. And obviously, if you do a complex sign, that takes away from the individual business signs. So that's another idea we're throwing out there for you. So tonight, this is presented in a workshop format. We're looking for your feedback, as I mentioned. And of the two main issues with portable signs, the question is whether we limit the prohibition on all portable signs to allow some or all, or to allow them in certain circumstances, and whether we need to develop standards to do this and an application process and monitoring program, or whether we just continue to prohibit them outright, which could lead to some enforcement against the sort of the casual use of some of these signs over the years if we're going to take an official stance not to allow them. The second question is regarding sign area, and that's how to measure sign area, both for freestanding and building-mounted signs. It's whether to count the frame or the letters only, and it's whether the current policy of providing exemptions is working, or the alternative suggested by Chair James, which would be a complete reworking of how we calculate those standards. Sorry.
Thank you very much for the report. Specific questions about the report at this time? Vice Mayor?
When you talk about portable signs, and you were talking about the A-frames, that seems, well, in my opinion, the A-frame issue is fairly clear. You brought up the Art in April sign.
What sign?
You brought up the Arts in April sign
Uh-huh.
that actually I think Cornerstone ironically had one out front. Is that what you mean by unique situations of, are we going to try to outright ban that? Because right now I guess theoretically those aren't allowed, or do we have some flexibility that somebody can come and say, hey?
Well, we've tried to apply a reasonable standard because that is a special event, it is temporary, and those signs are allowed. It's the portable signs that aren't allowed.
So
but what's the best way to advertise something like Arts in April? It is a simple sign out front that you can move in and out during the day for the week or two that the event occurs.
So you're saying that the Arts in April is allowed under the current temporary?
Well, that's our interpretation. A
clear,
strict
but-
reading of the ordinance would say no, it's a prohibited sign because it's a portable sign.
Okay, as opposed to putting a banner up for,
Correct. They could do a banner, they
ironically.
could do other things, right.
okay. So maybe that's just a simple fix to that language there to say, because we have the banner rules or, temporary signs, that something like that is also, the discretion is there to approve that. Would that be helpful?
Yes.
Okay. That's my only question.
Other questions, Councilmember Hall?
Yeah, just one quick one. So I get where we actually will allow temporary sign. I think one of the suggestions mentions was when the bakery was reopening again because they didn't have all their signage and things like that back up. We allowed them to do that, but that was something that was specifically approved. They came and they said we need to do this, or was that something they just did and we said, oh well, okay, because you're reopening?
No, that's something they just did, and staff tried to be reasonable again with the business since it was just reopening, and it was for a temporary period, but we let them know you can't keep going, you can't continue with this, you can't change the copy on the blackboard and keep it as a permanent fixture out front. So most often staff is responding to something that a business owner has done, and they're just crazy for use for these A-frame signs, so that's what we're doing.
And some of them look nice, but they kind of get in the way of the walkway. I guess one question I have then was with regards to menu signs. What if someone is using an A-frame as a menu sign? I mean, then do we have a crossover hybrid here, or how is that being determined at this juncture? Because I could write my menu in chalk on a nice A-frame, and then I've got a menu sign, and yes, it's portable. But what if I glue it to the ground? Or I'm being facetious, of course, but no. I mean, how would you determine, or what is the determination?
Well, I think that's a good question. In part cases there, we're going to require an application. And if you go look at some of them to try to formalize it, for example, we encouraged Hotel Bardesano to put up the display case so they could put their menu because people needed to see. So I think part of what we're also saying here is there may be an application and a review process that at least goes through the ZDRB for these types of things to ensure that they're done tastefully. There is some split opinion in the ZDRB, but in part, we are a culinary community, and I also think we need to recognize, some of our restaurants their price point's a little different than some people might not be familiar with, and that's a polite way to let people check out things before they overcommit.
And I was going to go ahead, please.
I would just add that an A-frame has a rather large footprint.
Right.
And they can be awkward in that manner. And a lot of the portable signs we see used in town, the open signs and the menu signs, are on a stand with a smaller footprint, and they're easier to move. And that's just something that's been sort of a natural selection type thing. But it's right, if Steve is correct, if we have a review process, we can
right.
impose conditions.
And that's sort of mentally where I'm at, because, I mean, when we look at the types of restaurants and who is coming to visit them, I mean, those are, in my opinion, appropriate. And you could go to any high-end establishment anywhere and pick the country in the world, and they have those types of signs. So I was trying to understand how maybe an A-frame versus menu sign could be related. But I think those are my only questions for now.
Any other questions?
I do have one.
Councilmember Dornbecker?
So is the only differentiation between the portable sign is that it's like an easel rather than an A-frame? Is that I'm trying to
Portable
understand.
signs are just signs that come in and out of the business on a daily basis. An A-frame is the sandwich board sign that has a large footprint. And then the other signs don't really have a structure. They can be, there's more design flexibility for, say, an open sign or a menu sign.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
How it would be displayed.
Thank you.
My question gets to that definition of A-frame, because the problem is when we say it's literally an A-frame, then the creative businesses out there immediately find something that steps just one step outside that definition. And it still is an intrusion into the right-of-way. It's still placed in the street. It's still whatever. And then they go from an A-frame to something that is stuck in a landscape area instead. And it's just, it serves the same purpose and skirts the definition of a portable or an A-frame.
That's a good point.
So,
and probably the reason behind the blanket prohibition in the first place, because they're just portable.
this is one of the most challenging, I think, ordinances for us to try to stay out front of those that want to abuse it. And what's going to happen, in my opinion, is the folks that comply with this are going to suffer because of the businesses that violate it. The open signs, I have a pet peeve about some of the open signs that I see in town that never are by the front door, that always end up down the street to where they decide it's the most visible spot for their business. I see that, as well as the misuse of A-frames. But then, do you single out the real estate industry and say, yes, you can do an A-frame, but that might need to fall under a temporary. And if we don't have a temporary definition that works right now, then I think we need one. Because I do think a week-long Arts in April, or month-long Arts in April, or a week where it's committed to Yountville, or under repair, or welcome back because of the fire. I mean, we need to have some common sense, but as soon as we allow that, somebody puts up a creative structure. I mean, remember we were dealing with two mannequins sitting at a table drinking wine in front of a tasting room, and that was technically not defined as a sign, but
Right.
the purpose was that.
A lot of really good points. One way we're trying to control that is with an application and review with an annual monitoring, so that we're on top of it. So if that open sign inches out into the landscape strip, we let them know that they're in violation of the permit. Perhaps we have a penalty that applies, but we have a more active role because they have an active permit with us instead of just doing it. You mentioned real estate signs, and that's actually the only category of A-frames or portable signs that's allowed. And I mentioned it in the staff report, but not in my presentation. One of the problems that we've had is that they're permitted to be at intersections to designate a turn, but the question has arisen by some realtors who say it's not prohibited to put one at each and every intersection in a linear row, rather than it just turning intersections. And we think that's completely overdone. That's something that we think needs revision to be clarified, that
Yeah, I thought that language was changed so that there are only specific major intersections through town where they can put them. I thought that was a restriction to avoid that very thing.
No, they're not. They're not allowed at certain intersections, and they're allowed on certain streets, but it's not specific as to turning intersection or straight-through intersection.
One of the things that staffs, even at our level, when we discuss, the opportunity to allow the application and then the terms of regulation gives us some broader control. It also creates the funding structure potentially for the enforcement, because we're leanly staffed. And I know it's very frustrating to council members when they see something, because you generally call and tell me when you see something, and then the expectation is we go out and do it. We have a fairly restrictive sign ordinance. Not necessarily inappropriate. Our business community has a love-hate relationship with our sign ordinance because they appreciate the aesthetic and the platform that it creates. But, as we see, there are people always looking for an opportunity, and frankly, it's also an education issue. Just when you get one set of people that understand what you can and can't do, there's a bright young new manager with a great idea that they saw from City X that they want to bring in, and off they go, and they don't necessarily know or think that they should come check with the town. So in one case, and it's troubling for staff because we know a $500 use monitoring fee seems offensive to the business community, but when I have to tell you how much time and who spends involved going and tracking them and how many I put in the trunk of my car, it's really what it comes down to in this community, because most of the enforcement violations, they don't occur on Tuesday between 10 and 5. They occur on Saturday, Sunday evenings. So it's just something for us to be aware of. We're suggesting to you that if you want to have some flexibility, it probably does need to come with rules. We'll go mark where it's supposed to be, and if it's not, then the person loses their, I just think if you want to go down, there's some opportunities that way to approach that. And it's also interesting that in spite of our efforts, we've not been successful at getting the business community to really participate in this dialogue.
I'd like to get more council feedback that we can give to staff. So if there's specific comments about the conclusions, whether it's language related to portable signs or the calculation of sign area, specific feedback to those issues, let's deal with that for right now. Vice Mayor seems to be ready to go.
I'm ready. Let's get moving. I'm totally against A-frames. Is that clear? I do think that the idea of like the Arts in April, et cetera, should be incorporated in the temporary sign language. And I don't think we should make it cost prohibitive that you've got to go through this huge application fee to put an Arts in April sign or something like that out. I personally think that the open sign, well, let me just say that I actually think that Jason Jane's idea is really intriguing. I think if we had a major sign problem, then I think that we would explore something more radical, but I guess I don't think that we need to kind of reinvent the whole wheel. But if we were starting from scratch, I think his idea is really good. But I guess I have to say I don't necessarily think we need to go down that road right now. I think on the open signs, I generally think that the open sign issue is not that big of an issue. I've kind of looked around town, and some people seem to have multiple open signs, and I've noticed some people don't have multiple ones anymore. I think you guys have enforced that a bit. My biggest concern has to do with the portable nature of some of these signs, and I can say this from personal experience. I don't have the best located business in town, and people who are on the backside of complexes, you generally pay less to be back there. And you know when you go in business that you don't have a sign. So I don't think that it makes any sense for myself or Bottega or people in the back of Edward James Courtyard to be dragging signs out front under the guise of I'm a victim of being in the back or off the side of a market, because that's the way it is, right? That's part of what you got involved, and I think the aesthetic part of it is negative. So the idea of having that if it's a complex, that it can have an open sign or maybe two for some reason, I can see that flexibility might make sense. I'm not sure how that works. They want to duke it out, but then you're putting business names on the sign. to say, well, it's X wherever in the back. It doesn't make sense to me. And I put that in the context that we talked about the wayfinding sign. The whole purpose of that is to give people more opportunities to say, hey, their business is somewhere else. So I don't feel any great need for the flexibility on that. And I think on the portability, which also kind of goes in the menu signs, I think Jean T is probably the best example. That sign is clearly not offensive. There's nothing wrong with that sign. And the main reason is it's right there at the front. It's, it adds a little bit to it. I would take the flip side example. If you had that exact sign and I wanted to put my deli menu and drag it out to the Washington Street sidewalk, or take Bottega's and stick it out there, that doesn't make sense. It needs to be within 5 feet or 10 feet or something of the main entrance of that establishment. And again, we all knew what we got ourselves into when we signed a lease for something that's not on the main drag. Sorry. I like your real estate signs with the linear. To clarify that person should not have come and said, ha, 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 it's not in there. It will be. And I don't think the permitted sign area needs to change. I don't think the sign content needs to change. I really, actually, let me just put it this way. I agree with generally all of your recommendations. I just want to make it clear that I think the A-frames should absolutely go. If it's inside a business, like at Kelly's, the fact you can see it, that doesn't bother me, right? I mean, it's inside. I don't think we can say to somebody, you've got a window and I can see through there and you've got an A-frame chalkboard. That's not a problem. But if you want to drag it out to the street, that's a problem. Did I answer everything?
I think close enough for now.
Thank you.
Councilmember Dornbecker?
Well, I have to admit that this time I agree with Louis. I hate the A-frame signs, but I understand that for example, with Kelly's, we shouldn't be legislating what sign he can have inside his store. So, and with the wayfinding sign program coming, I think that will give our businesses an opportunity to have a presence on the street in other ways. And everything else, the sign area and the content of the sign, I think all of those things, I generally agree with your comments. So I don't think that we need to rethink the entire sign ordinance. I think these sticking with it and using your head and also some consciousness about if there was a fire at the bakery and now they're reopening, to give them a little leeway. That doesn't hurt anyone as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Moeller?
I think I'm also going to say pretty much the same thing on the A-frames. Except for real estate signs, no way. If they're inside a building, I'm fine. It's only when they're on the street. I think, something that we might want to consider, because this has been going on for year after year after year, is maybe put a penalty in place. I think you're going to get everyone's attention real fast if, something like that pops up. So, I think we definitely need to shut those down once again. And I also agree with pretty much everything that the ZDRB put in here. I really don't have any exceptions to that. Having these fees where you go around and check everything, I think a nice penalty in place is going to save you a lot of time and effort for all these checking fees. So that would be the way I'd probably approach that. Open signs, I kind of agree with what that they should allow portable open signs. And the development signs, I don't really think we need to make the business such as Washington Square list everything. I mean, I just kind of use that as a way to give people directions. If you want to go to the gas station, go look for this. So, because I don't really think you can put those in well enough that, people can use those for direction. I think our wayfaring sign is going to take care of that. And I think the last thing you asked about was the sign area. I would include the border of the frame. It's all one thing instead of the letters. That's just going to be way too tedious. I also think that the part that I do agree with Chair Janes is that overall, when you look at the ordinance, it just seems so overwhelming and complicated. Maybe you really need some breaks or a way of bullet pointing things or something, because I do agree it doesn't need to be reworked as he suggested, but something that's easier to read. If there's, extra spare time with an intern or something, it sounds like a great summer intern project, but those are my comments.
Councilmember Hall.
Well, I guess I'm not going to disagree too much with anyone. A-frame signs, I don't agree. I don't like them. I don't think they conform with the way we want Yountville to look and appear to not just people that are coming to visit, but ourselves, frankly, because we use the streets that we drive up and down and walk up and down. So I'm against the A-frame. I think they're just not necessary, and they don't have visual aesthetic that I think we're looking for here as a community. In general, I agree with all the other comments that were listed here in the staff report. What I would say on sign area, because I think it bears merit, I'm not exactly sure how this works, but people put a lot of effort and attention into the borders associated with their signage. Sometimes it's more aesthetic than others, and to penalize one for using that to measure the width or dimension of a sign and not another because it just uses lettering and to measure just the lettering, I'm not exactly sure that that's appropriate. I think the bordering has to be included because so much aesthetic and marketing goes into that or can go into that. I think you have to think of the whole picture of what the sign really is. And I don't know if that's clear enough, but I think you understand what I'm driving at. You did ask a question about whether or not sign area should be measured on both sides of a sign. I think without exception. I mean, if someone has the ability to hang a sign and they can get two sides of it, then it's twice as wide or large as it would be otherwise. So I didn't hear that mentioned in the others. But in general, I think that, directionally we're where we need to be. I don't want to rewrite the entire ordinance, and I don't think that it really bears that effort at this point in time. As Councilmember Chilton said, signage is, it's out there, we all see it, we feel the impact of it, but, it's not like it's changing the way we operate day in, day out. I would then finally say with regards to any A-frames, if there is a limited use or something that is very specific, like we talked about for the need for Bouchon Bakery, I would be okay with that. I think it's very limited in nature, and or a certain thing that happens seasonally to just do some brief marketing for 2 weeks for something that's going on in the community, that it is a fair way to do it. And lastly, I don't know how we deal with this, but when there are events at the Yountville Community Center or elsewhere where a nonprofit or an organization is trying to direct people to get to some place or to get to the meeting room, I think we obviously have to make an exception for that as well. And I think that was what my colleagues meant to say if they didn't necessarily expressly say it. But thank you.
Thanks. I want to just follow up on that before I forget it. At the community hall, community center, there are A-frames that go out there. Yes. When there's a special event going on. So we need to be fair about the restriction. So that's an interesting dynamic. But I just had that pop into my head. If we don't have language in here prohibiting human-held signs, let's get language in here. Because what I sure don't want to see is the dancing sign guy. That's probably the most offensive visual. No, the sandwich board was somebody who would walk up and down. But
you want that out too?
Consider maybe a violation deposit, almost working the other way from. You're talking about how we're lean staff, we can't enforce the regulations that are in place. So what if somebody's got to put up $500 and then at the end of the review period, if you don't have any violations reported, you get your money back. But if you do, you don't. I mean, clearly, there needs to be a fine mechanism to stop the misuse. There's no way around that. So how you do it, either up front or on an enforcement basis, I think there's no question in the business community, those that want to violate, because not everybody does this. Some are very fair and appropriate. But those that want to violate this are going to keep pushing until, not the first time you say stop, because I know for a fact you've told certain businesses to stop doing what they're doing, and they're still doing it, months, years later. So unless they're fined and fined to the point where it impacts them, they're going to keep doing it. They figure, hey, it's worth $50 a year. They're not going to catch me for 11 months. I'm going to showcase my business in the meantime. That's the problem we're having, I think. So I think, for the most part, the ordinance is reasonably well written. I think we need to define beyond an A-frame definition, to your point, because I've already seen it. If you've got landscaping in front of your place, you don't need an A-frame. You stick it in the ground, and it works the same way. So if somebody's going to say it's not an A-frame, but it's a freestanding sign that kind of acts like an A-frame, I think we need somehow to craft language that, whether that says any freestanding sign not adjacent to a business opening, and then we have to be clear about what does adjacent mean. Some businesses have 20 feet away. Some people have it at the corner. So, again, unfortunately, you have to create the ordinance to react to the person that's trying to abuse it. But I think part of it is enforcement. It's on us to convince them that they're not going to get away with it. But also, I think we have to wait and see what happens with the wayfinding sign program. Assuming businesses get on board, I think that's going to eliminate a lot of the reasons people say they need to have these freestanding signs. They don't know I'm in the back of the market or in the back of the plaza. Well, yeah, they do. It says so right there. So I think we're going to need to reevaluate once we get the wayfinding program in place, regardless of what language we have going on here. So, enough about signs for tonight?
Yes.
Enough? Oh, sure. If there is any public comment, now would be the time to be part of our discussion. No? Thank you. So there's some direction for you to chew on.
Thank you.
Sorry, Samantha, about the special event signs. Okay, let's move on to our zoning. Speaking of zoning design review, by the way, I did want to commend, this was a good example of how the ZDRB provided some very strong comments throughout the whole report here that helps us really understand better what direction we should go. So thanks on our behalf to all of them for that input. So, speaking of the Zoning and Design Review Board, we did have earlier interviews, as well as for the Measure A Financial Oversight Committee, and I believe staff has a report on that.
Yes, a brief report. Council, we had two openings on ZDRB due to natural expiration of term, and staff did the recruitment for those positions. Jason Janes was interviewed earlier, and also Jason Scoggins. We received two applications for the two positions, and Rob Winterberg did not seek reappointment for this time. So at the conclusion of the interview, it was unanimous by council on their vote tallies to reappoint Jason Janes and to appoint Jason Scoggins. So we ask for council to take action to make those appointments with the terms of office to expire July 19th, 2015.
Great. Thank you very much for that, and thanks again on our behalf to both of our new applicants and new members of the ZDRB for stepping up to serve the community.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Well, thank you. Since we already included our ballots. Measure A, Oversight Committee appointment?
Measure A, yes. We recruited for a vacancy on Measure A due to natural expiration of term, and at the close of the filing period, we received one application from incumbent member James Shoup, who was interviewed earlier this evening, and staff is recommending that council take action to reappoint him, and it will be forwarded to the County Board of Supervisors for confirmation, and that term of office is due to expire June 30th, 2015.
So this is a recommendation for appointment.
Yes.
Is there a motion for that recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. And thanks also to Mr. Shoup for continuing his service on that Measure A Oversight Committee. Moving on to staff informational reports. Do we have any this evening? Yes.
As Louis already alluded to, I just wanted to reiterate what was in the blurb on Friday, that we're seeing some very positive trending in our summer camp with 45 campers last week. So we're seeing, in comparison to that same time frame last year, about a 30% increase in enrollment and 40% in revenue, which is great. And this week is not slowing down much. A lot of kids, kids. Our gate fees and our pass sales are also up almost $4,000 compared to this time last year at the community pool. So can be attributed to the hot weather that we were having, but also an increase in participation. So we hope to see that continue.
That's great.
Could you also remind everyone that's still watching
Yes.
about movie night this Friday and about fireworks?
Yes, movie night this Friday at 6 p.m. We'll have Mexican food, beer and wine for sale, and the regular movie snacks, but that's sponsored by the Kiwanis Club of Yountville, and the food and snack sales are benefiting the Kiwanis International's prenatal and neonatal tetanus relief project, as well as the Kiwanis Family House at UC Davis, or in that area. And then the movie will start at dusk, which is Moneyball. And we're encouraging adults for this evening and to take a date night, leave the kids at home. That's what we're encouraging at the public's request, to try more of an adult-oriented evening. And then, of course, we'll have our fireworks display on July 4th from the same space there at the Corporation Yard at the back of the golf course as usual. And those typically go off about 9:40. But it should be a spectacular show, as always, and a great festival there at the Veterans Home as well, starting at noon.
And we did hear from Commander McCormick earlier about the afternoon full of live music that's also being offered up there, so a full day of activities for Independence Day.
Samantha, movie nights at the big park, North Yountville?
Yes, thank you. Yountville Community Park, the north end of town.
And Mayor Dunbar, one more. Just a reminder, the tennis court project is starting on June 25th out at Vineyard Park. It'll take about 2 weeks to do that project. So signs are up, and I would just ask people not to go into the tennis courts during the construction.
Great, thank you for that. Any other staff reports at this time? Do we have meeting reports? Let's see. Let me just ask. Anybody have meeting reports? I've got a couple, but I'll go eventually. Councilmember Mueller?
No, just a general comment. No meeting reports.
So we'll get to comments after we get the meetings taken care of.
Well,
Councilmember Dornbecker?
I would like to report on the Ad hoc Library Committee. We have been meeting, and we have been, Councilmember Mueller and our Commissioner, Linda Conchellian, have been actively pursuing volunteers, and we have just received word from Dennis Kreimeier and Nicole, forgive me, I've forgotten Nicole's last name, but that we have the first 10, I think, have gone through the whole process, and they are arranging orientations. So we assume that very soon we'll be able to announce that we'll be adding hours to the library. So that's our ad hoc committee, and also Friends of the Library. I want to thank them and thank us.
And so those folks are getting their Kindles? Is that what it is?
Well, they have to, it's after a certain
Number of hours.
number of hours of service.
That makes sense. Any meetings, Vice Mayor? So just very quickly, first meeting I attended this morning, actually, or this afternoon, the Napa County City Selection Committee, on which I've been chairing this year. There was a unanimous vote to appoint the natural rotation, which means Jill Teckles, Mayor of Napa, will become chair as of January 2013, and Mayor Jingles from Calistoga will be vice chair. and I believe, if I remember correctly, Mayor Jingles was appointed to represent at the Association of Bay Area Governments Executive Board, and Mayor Garcia of American Canyon was the alternate. At the Napa County Flood Control and Water Conservation District, the 2012-13 budget was approved, and there was a protest hearing set for July 10th regarding the Rutherford Reach Benefit Zone Assessment District. So those were the two action items from today. We've talked already about fireworks coming up. Are there other comments? Councilmember Mueller, you mentioned you had a comment?
Yes, I just wanted to bring it to the public's attention. They probably read in the Napa Register that, or saw online, that in the early morning hours on June 15th, which was just last Friday, there was a big fire at Jefferson and Pueblo in Napa. And what that means to Yountville is that is where the restaurant was that provides all the food for our local taco truck, Tacos Garcia. So if anybody's been looking for the taco truck since Friday, it's not been there. And so I'll try to keep everybody up to date when it might come back, but I think it's going to be a while.
Very unfortunate. There was also, I saw a grass fire over in Coombsville this afternoon that I believe was reported that no structures were impacted. But two reminders, especially the grass fire, though, how with all this great warm weather and with the winds, severe fire danger going on. So especially with 4th of July coming up, we all need to be really careful about that. Any other general comments from council? With that, just do we have any reason for closed session tonight?
Two very short ones.
Two very short ones it's all the time we have. So we'll do that. I'm going to, you could read the future agenda items as they're listed. And before I enter a motion or ask for a motion for adjournment, I just want to remind the public and the council that we have already canceled our July 3rd meeting. So the next time we will be meeting will be July 17th for a regular meeting. With that, is there a motion to adjourn to that January 17th meeting?
Do it to go close session.
Oh, that's true. We'll go to closed session and then adjourn after that. That's right. I was trying too hard to get it.
We're trying to get us
I was
out
trying
of
to get
here.
done by 10 o'clock. So prior to that adjournment, yes, we have canceled July 3rd, and now we're going to go into closed session. Thank you, everyone, for sticking with us.